Imagine for a second that you finally get the exact thing you have been dreaming of for years.
Oh, yeah.
You know the feeling, right? We all have that one specific fix, that one milestone or, I don't know, acquisition that we are entirely convinced is going to serve as the skeleton key to unlock a better life.
The silver bullet.
Exactly, the silver bullet.
Wow.
And Dr. Dan Goodman, who is this highly respected eye surgeon, actually saw the absolute darkest side of this phenomenon play out right in his clinic.
Wait, an eye surgeon?
Yeah, an eye surgeon. He had this patient, a woman who came to him absolutely desperate to ditch her glasses. Like,
Right.
she hated them. She felt they held her back in, every conceivable way.
Right.
So Dr. Goodman performs a LASIK surgery. And clinically speaking, the procedure is flawless. I mean, it goes perfectly. She wakes up, her corneas are healing beautifully, and she has 20/20 vision for the first time in perhaps decades.
Which is incredible.
It's a total medical triumph.
Ah.
But a few weeks later, she comes back into his office for a standard checkup, and she is utterly despondent. Yeah. She sits down in the exam chair, looks at the doctor who just gave her perfect eyesight, and tells him that the surgery completely ruined her life.
Wow. Which, from a purely medical perspective, presents a massive cognitive dissonance.
Right.
Because the inputs were correct, the biological output was correct, there is absolutely no clinical reason for her to be devastated.
Exactly. The doctor is sitting there completely baffled. He's, looking at her charts, looking at her perfectly healed eyes, and he presses her. He asks her what on earth the problem is.
And what did she say?
Well, then the truth, the really painful, unvarnished truth just comes spilling out. She confesses to him that she fully expected that once she lost her glasses, once she had this physical transformation, her husband would suddenly find her deeply attractive again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She expected that her coworkers, who had been dismissing her, would suddenly respect her intellect and value her contributions at work. She had essentially tied her entire self-worth.
Her marriage, her professional validation.
Yes, all of it, tied to this one superficial physical attribute. When she realized that didn't happen, when the bandages came off and she saw clearly that love and respect aren't driven by something as superficial as wearing lenses or not, she was completely crushed.
The illusion was gone.
The illusion was totally gone. Goodman had to look at this perfectly healthy woman and say, I have a problem I can't help you with. I'm sorry I didn't realize it earlier.
It is such a heartbreaking realization to witness, let alone experience.
Yeah.
I mean, to endure the wait, the cost, the anticipation of gaining exactly what you thought you always wanted, only to realize that the human happiness you were chasing is vastly more complicated than the mechanical fix you assumed would provide it.
It's devastating.
She basically misattributed her internal psychological pain to an external physical trait.
Exactly. Imagine finally getting exactly what you want, only to realize it is entirely divorced from what you actually need. And the reason we are starting with this story is that today you and I are exploring why so many of us make this exact same tragic, devastating miscalculation.
But not with our eyesight.
Right. We don't usually do it with our eyesight. We do it with our money.
Precisely. So in this deep dive, you're going to learn why spending money effectively is actually an art form driven almost entirely by human psychology, rather than, a rigid science driven by mathematical spreadsheets.
Which is what we usually think it is.
Right. We are unpacking Chapter 1 of Morgan Housel's The Art of Spending Money, which is titled Introduction, The Quest of the Simple Life.
I see.
And for anyone listening who is interested in business, entrepreneurship, or simply building a life that doesn't feel like a constant, exhausting treadmill, mastering this concept is arguably the most crucial skill you can develop.
Because if you don't.
Because blindly chasing wealth without a deep, uncomfortable understanding of your own emotional drivers is the fastest way to make yourself a prisoner of your own success.
Okay, let's unpack this mechanism, because this is the trap of misplaced expectations. If we want to put a label on it, we could call it the LASIK delusion.
The LASIK delusion, I like that.
And once you see the LASIK delusion for what it is, you start seeing it absolutely everywhere, especially in the business world, right?
You see it everywhere because it is a fundamental glitch in how the human brain processes complex emotional deficits.
Right.
The core concept here is that people constantly confuse a superficial, tangible fix with a deep, intangible psychological needs.
Yeah.
We all have these deep needs, right? We need respect. We need a sense of belonging to a tribe. We need a feeling of purpose. We need to feel secure. But those things are incredibly difficult to measure.
Yeah, you can't put belonging into a calculator.
Exactly. Money, on the other hand, is the ultimate tangible metric. You can count it, you can track it on a glowing screen, you can hold it in your hand.
It's right there.
And because it is so easily universally measurable, it becomes an incredibly seductive substitute for the things we actually want but just don't know how to get.
It's the path of least resistance for the human brain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I feel inadequate, figuring out why I feel inadequate requires years of painful introspection.
Therapy, journaling, hard conversations.
Yeah, but making my bank account number go up, that's just a math problem.
Precisely. For people who haven't done the incredibly hard, messy, often painful internal work of figuring out what truly feeds their soul.
Which, let's be honest, is most of us.
Oh, absolutely most of us. Making more money becomes the default objective. It is essentially a socially acceptable way to avoid therapy.
Oh man, that is so true.
We secretly harbor this assumption that more money will somehow seamlessly translate into solving an emotional void. It is the exact same misattribution of cause and effect as the ASIC patient.
She thought, no glasses equals a happy marriage.
And we think $1 million in revenue equals feeling like I am finally enough.
The source material gives some great concrete examples of this that I think we can all relate to, whether we've been the person doing it or the person watching a friend do it.
Definitely.
Like, think about the genuinely broke young professional who goes out and finances a luxury car they absolutely mathematically cannot afford. The monthly payments are just choking them.
We all know that guy.
Right. Why do they do it? It's not because they are super passionate about German engineering. It's because they believe the shiny metal sitting in the driveway is going to act as a currency to buy them respect and admiration from their peers.
Yes.
Or, to look at the other end of the spectrum, you have the wildly successful, incredibly rich entrepreneur who never, ever feels like she has enough.
The one who never stops.
Yeah, she keeps grinding, she keeps sacrificing her weekends, her health, her kids' school plays, all for the next million. But the satisfaction she thinks that next million will bring never actually arrives.
What's fascinating to me about both of those examples is the underlying psychological mechanism. Neither of those people are actually trying to buy the thing they are swiping their credit card for.
Wait, say more about that.
Well, the young guy isn't buying transportation. A used sedan provides transportation. He is trying to buy respect.
Right.
And the wealthy entrepreneur isn't trying to accumulate currency for its purchasing power. She already has more than she can spend. She's trying to buy a feeling of existential security, or perhaps the validation of her peers.
So they're buying emotions.
Exactly. But here's the tragic flaw in their logic. Money cannot actually complete that transaction. You cannot hand over a stack of bills and receive a jar of genuine respect in return.
Okay, I have to stop you there and push back a little, or at least play devil's advocate for the listener who is out there grinding right now.
Fair enough.
Because that sounds great in a psychology textbook, but in the real world, isn't it completely natural to want these things? We are constantly told by every advertisement, every movie, every social media feed, and frankly, by the way society treats wealthy people, that success does equal respect.
It's hard to ignore.
It is. When you pull up in the luxury car, the valet treats you better. When you have the massive exit from your startup, people listen to your opinions more intently. So are we really crazy for outsourcing our internal self-worth to our bank accounts when that is exactly the metric society uses to judge us?
That is the perfect pushback, because it highlights why this trap is so incredibly difficult to escape. You aren't crazy. It is entirely natural.
Okay.
In fact, Housel points out that a combination of evolutionary biology and modern social forces are constantly screaming at us about what we should want.
Evolutionary biology.
Yes, if we look at human evolution, we are fundamentally hardwired to want to signal our value to the tribe.
Because if you don't have value, you're out.
Exactly. For our ancestors, signaling your value, showing that you were a good hunter or resourceful gatherer, meant you weren't going to be left behind to freeze in the winter. It meant access to mates. It meant survival.
Wow.
Our brains evolved to release dopamine when we successfully elevate our status within the group.
So we are essentially walking around with Paleolithic hardware, trying to process modern capitalism.
That is a brilliant way to put it. Fast forward to today. We no longer signal our value by bringing down a mammoth. We signal it through abstract financial metrics and the goods we purchase with them.
The luxury car is the mammoth.
The luxury car is the mammoth. So the desire to signal status isn't the problem. It's a biological reality. The danger and the core of the Lessig delusion applied to money is that We forget the money is just a signaling tool.
We think it's the actual value.
We start believing the money is the value itself. When you outsource your self-worth to a bank account, you are taking your emotional stability, which should ideally be generated internally, and placing it entirely in the hands of an external, endlessly shifting metric.
Oh, that's dangerous.
And the reason that is so dangerous is that you can never truly satisfy that external metric. There is always someone with a bigger boat, a faster car, or a higher valuation.
It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom.
Hey.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? The practical takeaway here is that before you spend your money, whether it's $50 on a dinner you don't really want to go to, or dedicating 5 years of your life to chasing a specific financial milestone, you have to audit your emotional expectations.
You really do.
You have to sit down, look in the mirror, and ask yourself a really uncomfortable question. Am I buying a tool to genuinely improve my life, or am I secretly trying to buy an emotion like respect, love, belonging, or peace of mind that money literally cannot purchase?
Because if you don't ask that question, you will spend your life acting out scripts written by other people.
Right.
If the internal delusion is thinking money can buy love or respect, the external delusion is just blindly following what society tells us we're supposed to buy with our money, completely regardless of our actual preferences.
Which perfectly explains why we fall victim to society's invisible scripts. We don't know what we actually want internally, so we just look around and buy what the rich guy next to us is buying.
Monkey see, monkey do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Honestly, this brings us to a story from the source material that absolutely blew my mind. We're talking about the supposed to syndrome.
Yes, this is where the abstract evolutionary psychology we just talked about crashes into the real world in a very, very expensive way.
Yeah. So Morgan Housel shares this deeply personal anecdote from when he was a 19-year-old college student.
Okay.
He was working as a valet at a 5-star hotel in Los Angeles. Now imagine the scene. You're 19, you're making hourly wages, and your entire job is to observe the ultra-wealthy as they come and go.
Talk about a front row seat to wealth.
Right. One day, the hotel is hosting this incredibly exclusive, invite-only, high-end furniture show for the city's absolute elite. So Housel and the other valets are standing around the valet stand, probably talking about how to pay for textbooks or rent, and this wealthy man comes out of the hotel.
Just a guest at the show.
Yeah. He's chatting with a friend, waiting for his car to be brought around, and he casually mentions, just completely offhand, that he just dropped $21,000 on an armchair inside the show.
I think we need to just pause and let that number sink in for the listener. $21,000 for a place to sit down.
Right, and the valets, these young kids working for tips, are visibly stunned. Their jaws drop. I mean, let's brainstorm what it feels like to be that kid.
Oh, it must have been mind-blowing.
$21,000 is likely more than that valet makes in an entire year of standing on his feet for 8 hours a day. It's a life-changing sum of money.
Yep.
And this guy just spent it on upholstery.
Unbelievable.
So the wealthy guy sees their bewildered expressions. He looks over at these dumbfounded 19-year-olds and he says, "Boys, I know. It's crazy. But when you have money, this is what you're supposed to do."
That phrase,
Right.
what you're supposed to do,
It's crazy.
that is the most terrifying and revealing sentence in the entire book. Notice what he didn't say to those valets.
What do you mean?
He didn't say, "Boys, it's the most ergonomically perfect, comfortable chair in the world. It cured my back pain." He didn't say, "I have a deep, lifelong passion for mid-century modern craftsmanship, and this is a masterpiece." He didn't even say he liked the chair.
Oh my gosh, you're right. He practically admitted he thought the purchase was ridiculous.
I know, it's crazy.
Exactly. He bought it to fulfill a societal script. He was mindlessly pursuing a societal expectation of how a rich person is expected to behave.
Wow.
He had reached a level of wealth where the evolutionary drive to signal status completely bypassed his own personal autonomy. The money was no longer serving his desires. His desires had been replaced by the obligation to spend the money in ways that signaled his wealth to other wealthy people.
It's just absurd, joyless spending. And I think we all do this on a micro scale.
Absolutely.
Like maybe it's not a $21,000 chair. Maybe it's buying the latest iPhone when your old one works perfectly fine, just because everyone at the office has the new one and you don't want to look like you're falling behind.
Status signaling. Yeah, it's not just running a marathon because everyone else is running. It's like running a marathon, crossing the finish line with bleeding nipples and shin splints, only to realize you actually hate running and you would have much rather stayed home and read a book.
That's a great visual.
You've got the medal, but you're looking around like, wait, why did I do this?
The source text brings in a brilliant analogy to explain this dynamic involving Winston Churchill.
Oh, I love this one.
Churchill famously said that he got more out of alcohol than alcohol got out of him. It's a witty line about knowing your limits, but Housel applies this logic beautifully to wealth.
How so?
He notes that there are so many rich people who let their money get more out of them than they get from it.
That is deep.
They spend their entire lives desperately, exhaustingly chasing money, sacrificing their health, their marriages, their youth, and then when they finally get it, they have absolutely no clue how to actually use it to make themselves happy.
They just buy the chair.
They just buy the chair. So the money dictates their actions. It forces them into buying $21,000 chairs they don't even like, rather than them dictating how the money can serve their joy. The money extracts their autonomy.
I want to coin a term for this based on what we're talking about. Let's call it expensive pantomiming.
Expensive pantomiming, I like that.
How much of our spending is just expensive pantomiming of success? We put on the costume of the successful person, we lease the luxury car, we stretch to buy the house in the right zip code, we buy the watch, we buy the chair.
The whole uniform.
Yeah. But if those things don't align with your deep internal desires, you aren't living a successful life. You're just an actor in a play you don't even enjoy. You are performing wealth for an audience of strangers who are too busy performing wealth themselves to even care about your chair.
Expensive pantomiming is a perfect encapsulation, and it brings up the tragedy of the situation. This man won the capitalist game.
He had it all.
He had the money. He had achieved the security most people dream of. Yet his reward was to surrender his free will to a furniture catalog because he was terrified of violating the behavioral norms of his tax bracket.
When you look at it this way, it completely changes how we should look at our bank accounts. Instead of asking, how do I get more? The actual question we have to ask ourselves tonight is, what script am I blindly following?
Right.
So the takeaway for you, the listener, is to brutally audit your ambitions. Look around your house. Look at your credit card statement. Look at your goals for the next 5 years. Make sure you are acquiring things and chasing milestones because they bring you actual, undeniable internal joy.
Not just because you're supposed to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do not buy the uniform of success just because it's the standard issue gear in your industry, your neighborhood, or your friend group.
Because if you just blindly follow the script, you might end up with a house full of incredibly expensive furniture, a driveway full of depreciating metal, and absolutely zero contentment. Which raises the ultimate question. If the $21,000 chair doesn't bring contentment, what does?
And that leads us to one of the most fascinating contrasts in the entire chapter. We need to look at what actually builds human happiness. And to do that, the source material brings in Carl Jung. We are talking about Carl Jung's blueprint versus the wealth obsession.
To understand why this is so important, we have to establish who Carl Jung was. He wasn't a financial advisor.
Not at all.
No. He was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, one of the most influential psychologists in human history alongside Freud. He spent his entire life studying the deep human mind, our subconscious depths, our collective desires, our shadow selves, our neuroses.
With heavy stuff.
The heaviest stuff. He understood what makes the human animal tick on a profound level, and at one point in his career, he was asked to outline what he considered to be the basic, fundamental factors making for happiness in the human mind.
Yeah, and he gave a list.
He provided a very specific list of 5 things.
And as we go through this list, I want you listening to really pay attention to what is not on it. Because what is missing is just as loud as what is there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's break down Jung's 5 pillars of happiness and explore why they are so vital from a psychological perspective. Number 1, good physical and mental health.
That makes total sense.
This is foundational. If your biology is suffering, your psychology will suffer. It is the baseline of existence.
Hard to be happy if you're sick all the time.
Right. Number 2, good personal and intimate relationships, marriage, family, friendships. We discussed the evolutionary need for a tribe earlier. We are deeply social creatures. Isolation registers in the brain as physical pain.
So true.
Number 3, the faculty for perceiving beauty in art and nature.
I want to pause on number 3 because that one always surprises me. Health and relationships make sense. But why did a clinical psychologist say that perceiving beauty in nature is a fundamental pillar of human happiness?
It goes back to our evolutionary environment. For hundreds of thousands of years, the human brain developed in constant immersive contact with the natural world.
Out in the wild.
Yes. Our nervous systems are calibrated to the fractal patterns of trees, the sounds of water, the rhythms of daylight. When Jung talks about perceiving beauty in art and nature, he is talking about a sense of awe and connection to something larger than the self.
Ah, I see.
It pulls us out of our neuroses and our petty status games. It provides a grounding perspective that a spreadsheet simply cannot offer.
That makes so much sense. We evolved to find joy in the sunrise, not in a quarterly earnings report.
Exactly.
Okay, what are the last two?
Number 4, reasonable standards of living and satisfactory work. Note the word reasonable. He didn't say opulent.
We didn't say private jet.
No private jets. He meant having enough to remove the chronic stress of survival, paired with work that feels meaningful. And finally, number 5, a philosophic or religious point of view capable of coping successfully with the vicissitudes of life.
A way to deal with the bad times.
Meaning, you need a framework to handle tragedy, failure, and the inevitable suffering of life because money cannot shield you from mortality.
It's such a grounded, beautiful, holistic list. It reads like an instruction manual for the human soul. But the text points out this incredible tragic irony.
It really is tragic.
If you walk up to any parent at a playground and ask them, what do you want for your kids? Almost all of them will immediately say, I just want them to be happy.
Every time.
And if you press them, do you want them to be rich and successful or maybe famous CEO? They usually reply, well, sure, that would be nice, but mostly, above all else, I just want them to be happy.
They verbally endorse Jung's list for their children.
Yes.
But then look at how those same parents actually live their own adult lives. Look at what they model for their children. So many of them chase money, status, and professional prestige at the direct, violent expense of their own happiness.
It's totally contradictory.
They sacrifice their physical and mental health pillar, one to work 80-hour weeks. They neglect their intimate relationships and marriages pillar 2 because they are constantly traveling or stressed.
Missing dinners, missing soccer games.
Right. They ignore nature pillar 3 because they are staring at screens.
Mhm.
And they abandon philosophy pillar 5 because their entire worldview becomes defined by corporate ladders and net worth.
Wow.
They systematically destroy the very factors of happiness they wish for their children, all to chase a level of extreme wealth that Jung didn't even include on the list.
Which is wild, because having lots of money is conspicuously absent from the blueprint. But I have to ask the obvious question here. I can hear the listener saying, wait a minute, doesn't money buy the time and the resources to achieve those 5 pillars? Doesn't money buy the best health care, the time to spend with family, the vacations to see nature?
You are absolutely right, and we have to be realistic about that. Having some money absolutely helps with Jung's points.
It's an enabler.
It is the crucial enabler for point 4, securing that reasonable standard of living. It buys you access to good health care for point 1. It buys you the freedom to step away from the factory floor and spend time with your family for point 2. Money is a baseline utility. It is a necessary foundation.
Right.
But the trap is the belief that if a little money helps build the foundation, an infinite amount of money will build an infinitely happier life.
Right.
Extreme wealth, endless accumulation beyond that reasonable standard does not compound your happiness. In fact, as we saw with the wealthy parents destroying their health and marriages for the next promotion, the pursuit of extreme wealth often actively cannibalizes the other pillars.
It eats them alive.
Exactly.
It's truly fascinating that we spend 90% of our waking hours stressing over wealth accumulation. We optimize our portfolios, we grind for the next promotion, we read endless articles on how to maximize ROI. Yet extreme wealth itself is fundamentally missing from the psychological recipe for joy.
It's nowhere to be found.
We are obsessing over an ingredient that isn't even in the cake. We're in the kitchen, furiously whisking together a pile of cash, wondering why it doesn't taste like contentment.
It's a profound mismatch between our daily actions and our ultimate goals. And it raises an urgent question for how we structure our lives. If extreme wealth doesn't correlate with these core drivers of human happiness, how should we be using our limited time, energy, and resources?
The practical application here for you is to use money to secure that reasonable standard of living. Get your bills paid, build an emergency fund, get comfortable, get safe. That is a noble and necessary pursuit.
Absolutely.
But once you cross that threshold, once you have secured the baseline, you have to pivot. You have to consciously, deliberately pivot your energy toward your health, your relationships, and your perspective. You have to recognize when the game has changed. Don't sacrifice Carl Jung's actual happiness factors on the altar of endless wealth accumulation.
Because if you do, if you refuse to pivot, you'll end up like the parents who wish happiness for their children but model misery in their own lives. You will teach the next generation that money is the only metric that matters, completely perpetuating the cycle.
Okay, so if we know that money isn't a direct ticket to happiness, and if we know that society's invisible scripts are leading us to buy $21,000 chairs we don't even want just to pantomime success, it means the old way of thinking is broken.
Completely broken.
We need a completely new framework. We need to figure out how to actually look at our finances, not through the lens of a CPA, but through a psychological lens.
Which brings us to the core thesis of Housel's argument, the 6 common denominators of the art of spending.
Okay, let's get into these.
If we are going to shift our mindset from the clean, logical, mathematical science of spreadsheets to the messy, contradictory, emotional reality of human psychology, we have to internalize these 6 core truths about how money interacts with the mind.
So if we're constantly confusing superficial fixes with deep needs, it explains why we fall victim to society's scripts. We don't know what we want. To fix that, let's explore these 6 truths. The first concept Housel introduces is the dichotomy between using money as a tool versus using it as a yardstick.
Right.
Let's unpack the psychology of that.
The premise here is that there are essentially 2 fundamental ways a human being can relate to their money. You can view it as a tool, a wrench, a hammer, a vehicle, to build a better, more secure life for yourself according to your own private specifications.
Makes sense.
Or you can use it as a yardstick of status, a measuring tape to see how you stack up against the people around you.
The comparison game.
The tragedy of modern capitalism is that most people start out aspiring to use it as a tool. They say, I just want to make enough to be comfortable. But somewhere along the way, the evolutionary drive to signal status hijacks their brain, and they end up spending their entire lives exhausting themselves using it as a yardstick.
Always measuring.
They are constantly looking sideways, peering over the fence to see if their yardstick is longer than their neighbor's.
I love to think about this using a different metaphor. People treat money like a thermometer.
A thermometer.
Yeah, a thermometer is a yardstick. It just measures the temperature. It measures how hot or successful you are compared to the environment around you. If everyone around you is driving a nicer car, your thermometer tells you that you are cold, that you are failing.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
But money shouldn't be a thermometer. It should be a thermostat. A thermostat is a tool. You set it to a comfortable temperature, your personal level of contentment, and then you stop looking at it.
You just let it run.
Exactly. The machine just works in the background to keep you comfortable. You don't spend your entire day staring at the thermostat wishing it said 90 degrees.
That is a phenomenal metaphor. The person using money as a yardstick is staring at the thermometer, terrified of the temperature dropping below their neighbors. And because the neighbor's temperature is always rising, it is an unwinnable game.
Totally unwinnable.
Which naturally leads to the second denominator, because if you are obsessed with the thermometer, something terrifying happens. Money uses you.
We touched on this earlier with the Churchill quote about alcohol. If you are constantly trying to measure up, the yardstick becomes a weapon you beat yourself with.
Exactly. Money is not just an inert financial asset. It is an active psychological liability. It has gravity. It exerts force on your psyche.
It pulls you in.
If you aren't incredibly careful, if you don't maintain strict boundaries, the blind lust for more money will hijack your identity. It will slowly rewrite your personality.
How so?
You will start making decisions, ethical decisions, relational decisions, time management decisions, based entirely on what serves the accumulation of capital rather than what serves your soul. It will wedge out the parts of your life that actually bring you happiness, like Jung's pillars of nature and relationships.
Wow.
You wake up one day and realize you think you possess the wealth, but in reality, the wealth possesses you. You are its employee.
That is dark. It's like a parasite that convinces the host it's actually a vitamin.
Precisely.
But wait, if money shouldn't be the goal itself, how does it actually interface with happiness? This brings us to the third denominator, the indirect path.
Yes.
And I have to push back on this one a bit, because I've heard the phrase, money buys independence, a million times. But isn't that just a convenient, socially acceptable excuse rich people use to justify hoarding wealth? At what point does buying independence just become a polite way to say, I want to be richer and more powerful than you?
That is a very real risk, and it goes back to the difference between a tool and a yardstick. But when Housel talks about the indirect path, he is trying to dismantle the transactional view of happiness.
Okay, unpack that.
The transactional view says, I hand over cash, I receive joy. That is the LASIK delusion. The indirect path is the realization that money doesn't buy happiness directly. Rather, it buys the circumstances in which happiness can grow.
It buys the fertilizer, not the plant.
Exactly. It buys autonomy. It buys the ability to say no to a toxic boss. It buys the ability to wake up on a Tuesday and decide what you want to do with your morning. Let's use a tangible example.
Go for it.
Buying a massive, beautiful house doesn't inherently make you happy. The walls don't love you back. The marble countertops don't care if you are crying.
Right.
What makes you happy is the feeling of security it provides, and the friends and family you are now able to host inside that house for holidays and dinners. The money didn't buy the joy. The money just facilitated the environment for the relationship. The relationship is the actual biological source of the joy.
Oh, that completely changes how you look at a purchase. You're not buying the architecture, you're buying the potential for connection within the architecture.
Exactly.
If you buy the massive house, but you've alienated your family to get the money to buy it, the house is just an empty museum. It's worthless.
It's a pile of bricks.
All right, what about the fourth denominator? This one seems like the hardest to achieve. Enduring happiness is contentment.
This is an incredibly bitter pill for highly ambitious people to swallow. We are taught that ambition is a virtue and that satisfaction is a sign of laziness.
Hustle culture, baby.
Right. But the happiest people with money have figured out a psychological superpower. They know how to stop thinking about it.
Stop thinking about money.
If money never leaves your mind, if you are constantly checking your portfolio app on your phone, worrying about the next deal, stressing over what you can't afford, or calculating the ROI of every waking minute, it controls you. You are its servant.
Constantly checking the thermometer.
You can value money, you can appreciate the security it brings, but enduring sustainable happiness requires you to reach a state of contentment where the money fades into the background noise of your life.
It goes back to the thermostat analogy. Once the house is at 72 degrees, you stop thinking about the HVAC system. You go read a book or play with your kids. If you're still staring at the thermostat, you are missing out on the life happening in the room.
Precisely. And if you can't stop staring at the thermostat, it leads us to the fifth denominator, masking deeper problems. We discussed this with the LASIK patient, but it's worth reiterating as a core financial truth.
Let's hit it.
When you haven't done the difficult introspection to discover what truly feeds your soul, assuming that a better life just looks like a richer life is the easiest, laziest path to take.
Because it's tangible.
We use the pursuit of wealth to mask the real, terrifying issues in our lives. It is much easier to say, I'm unhappy because I don't have $1 million yet, than it is to admit, I'm unhappy because I am profoundly lonely, I lack a sense of purpose, and I don't know who I am outside of my career.
The financial pursuit becomes a socially praised coping mechanism for deep psychological voids.
That's exact.
It's the ultimate socially acceptable addiction. Nobody stages an intervention because you're working too hard, making too much money, even if it's destroying you inside.
Very true.
And finally, that brings us to the sixth denominator, which is essentially the caveat to all of this. No universal formula.
Because we all have wildly different psychologies, different childhood traumas, different insecurities, different baseline needs, and different sources of joy. What works for one person will seem absolutely crazy to another.
So personal finance is actually personal.
The spending habit that brings me deep, genuine fulfillment, maybe it's spending thousands on rare books or funding a local animal shelter, might look like a total, inexplicable waste of money to you. And that's okay. Personal finance is deeply personal. There is no one-size-fits-all spreadsheet for the human soul.
To anchor this sixth point about the lack of a universal formula, the text uses this incredibly powerful quote from author Luke Burgess. He says, "After meeting our basic needs as creatures, we enter into the human universe of desire. And knowing what to want is much harder than knowing what to need."
The human universe of desire, it's so vast, so uncharted, and so deeply confusing. Once you have enough food and shelter, biology stops giving you clear instructions.
I really want to pause on that quote and dissect it. Knowing what to want is harder than knowing what to need. That is so profound.
It really is.
For you listening right now, if you are trying to build a business or manage a team or plan your career, it is so easy to know what you need. It is mathematically obvious. You need revenue to make payroll. You need cash flow to keep the lights on. You need shelter, food, and basic health care for your family. The spreadsheet or your basic survival instincts tell you exactly what you need.
But once those are met...
But once those basic needs are met, you step out of the realm of necessity and into this vast, empty void of desire. And that is terrifying. What do you actually want that surplus cash flow for? What is the end game? Is it early retirement? Is it building an empire? Is it philanthropy? Is it buying a $21,000 chair?
And this is the crux of the entire argument. If you do not actively, consciously define what you want based on your own internal values and Jungian pillars, society will gladly define it for you.
The invisible scripts.
The evolutionary drive for status will define it for you. The marketing departments of luxury brands will define it for you. And you'll end up buying the chair, staring at the thermostat, and wondering why you feel so empty.
Exactly. So the practical takeaway from these 6 denominators isn't to stop trying to make money. It is to radically redefine your relationship with it. You must view your money purely as a tool, a thermostat, to leverage who you are and build the environment you want to live in. Never use it to define who you are. It is an instrument of your autonomy, not the source of your identity.
And that realization that money must be a servant to your autonomy rather than the master of your identity is the perfect bridge to our final concept from the chapter, the simple life and the master versus servant dynamic.
What I love about this next part is that it goes back over a century, which just proves that human nature, despite all our technological advancements, never really changes. We are fighting the exact same psychological battles our ancestors fought.
We truly are. The text brings in a writer named William Dawson, who published a book way back in 1907 called The Quest of the Simple Life.
19.
Even then, well over 100 years ago, long before Instagram or cryptocurrency or hustle culture, Dawson was observing his peers in London. These were people devoting their absolute entire lives to money, social climbing, and career success. And Dawson, playing the role of the observant outsider, noted that despite their wealth, they were utterly, profoundly miserable.
They were crushing it financially on the ledgers of 1907, but they were dying inside.
Exactly. Dawson realized a profound paradox. The people who were trying so desperately to acquire more money to secure their freedom were actually held captive by the pursuit.
Captive by their own goals.
What started as a rational strategy to live a better, more secure life became a rigid, uncompromising ideology they were beholden to. They were no longer directing their wealth, they were serving their money. The pursuit of the resource had become more important than the life the resource was supposed to fund.
There is a quote from Benjamin Franklin in the text that hits the nail on the head here, and it echoes exactly what Dawson saw in London. Franklin wrote, "Many a man thinks he is buying pleasure when he is really selling himself a slave to it."
It is a profound warning that echoes through centuries, but we need to clarify a massive, easily misunderstood nuance here.
Oh yeah, we do.
Because when modern people hear a phrase like the simple life, they immediately picture a very specific, almost monastic aesthetic. They picture selling everything, moving to a remote cabin in the woods, chopping their own firewood, wearing burlap sacks, and renouncing capitalism entirely.
Right, abandoning all worldly possessions and living like a monk, which for 99% of us sounds terrible.
Exactly. But that's not what Dawson meant in 1907, and it's certainly not what Morgan Housel is arguing for today. Dawson's simple life doesn't mean you have to live in a shack with no plumbing. It is not an ascetic rejection of the material world.
So what is it?
You can have a massive, beautiful home. You can have fancy cars. You can enjoy incredible, opulent luxuries. You can fly first class. The life is simple in a purely psychological sense. It is simple because the hierarchy of control is clear. Money serves you, not the other way around.
Oh, that is a crucial distinction. It's not about the size of the bank account. It's about who is holding the leash.
Precisely. The external lifestyle, the aesthetic of your existence, doesn't matter nearly as much as the internal dynamic. The questions you must ask are you actively, consciously choosing this life because it brings you deep, undeniable joy? Or are you addicted to the societal appeal of it?
Right.
Are you the master of your wealth, directing it like a conductor to improve your days, your health, and your relationships? Or are you the servant, constantly stressing about losing it, constantly comparing it to your peers, constantly working 80-hour weeks just to maintain a fragile facade of success?
Bringing this all full circle, going back to the guy with the $21,000 chair at the valet stand. Dawson would look at that guy with all his millions and say, he isn't making a life. He's just making a living.
Yes.
He's a highly compensated servant to the expectation of wealth. He is pantomiming success. Only a fool sacrifices his actual life, his limited time on earth, his peace of mind, his Jungian pillars of health and relationships for the endless, exhausting pursuit of an imaginarily better one.
Because that imaginarily better life is a mirage. Like the horizon, it constantly, inevitably recedes as you approach it. The moment you reach the milestone, the evolutionary brain moves the goalpost.
So to avoid becoming a slave to your own success, your ultimate goal should be to make a life, not just build a bank account.
Yeah.
You have to look at your possessions, your investments, and your career trajectory and honestly interrogate them. Do you own your things or do your things own you?
That's the test.
Do your possessions require so much upkeep, so much mental energy, so much insurance, and so much debt that they dictate your schedule and spike your stress levels? If they do, they aren't tools, they are masters.
If we pull all these disparate threads together, from the heartbreaking realization of the LESIC patient to the absurdity of the $21,000 chair, to Carl Jung's blueprint for joy, to William Dawson's warnings from a century ago, we arrive at the very soul of this chapter.
What's the bottom line?
If there is one overarching insight you take away from this entire deep dive, it's this. Earning money might be a science. It might be a relatively straightforward spreadsheet exercise of maximizing inputs and optimizing outputs, but spending money is a mirror. It is a psychological reflection. Your spending habits reflect your deepest insecurities, your unhealed evolutionary desire for status, and your unexamined assumptions about what a successful life actually looks like. True, enduring wealth is achieved the exact moment money stops being a scoreboard used to impress strangers and finally becomes a quiet background tool used to build your own personal independence, contentment, and joy.
A quiet tool.
Wow.
I absolutely love that. Stop staring at the thermometer. But to truly master this art of spending, to really untangle the psychology of our wallets, you first need to understand why other people make such wildly different, seemingly bizarre choices with their cash.
Because everyone's mirror looks a little different.
Exactly. Why does someone else's quiet tool look like absolute financial insanity to you? Which brings us to a fascinating realization for our next deep dive. Every single financial decision, no matter how crazy, irrational, or reckless it looks from the outside, makes perfect logical sense to the person making it once you have enough information about their past.
I can't wait for that one.
Me neither. Until next time, take a hard look at your own spreadsheet, look in the mirror, and ask yourself what story it's really telling. Are you building a life or just chasing a mirage?
So, what if the biggest financial lie you have ever been told isn't, about how to invest your money, but why you actually want it in the first place?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a heavy question to start with.
Right, it is. But it is fundamentally uncomfortable because it forces us to kind of look past our bank accounts and stare directly into our own, I guess, psychological voids.
Exactly. Because we spend our entire lives convinced that we are grinding for the luxury car or the massive house with the imported marble.
Yeah, the designer watch, the vacations.
Right. We tell ourselves that once the business hits that next revenue marker, we get the reward. And we think that reward will finally make us feel complete.
But if we pull the curtain back on the source material we are exploring today, that entire narrative is exposed as this, beautifully constructed mirage.
It really is a mirage.
You actually aren't grinding for this stuff at all. At a deep, primal, almost biological level, what you really want is respect, admiration, and attention.
Yep. Attention is the core currency there.
And somewhere along the line, you have been tricked into thinking money is this guaranteed, frictionless shortcut to secure those things.
It's the ultimate bait and switch of the human condition, honestly. We confuse the physical tool for the emotional destination. We see the object like the car or the watch, but we are actually starving for the feeling we assume that object will magically generate inside of us.
Right, which brings us to exactly what we are doing today. We are doing a deep dive into Morgan Housel's work, specifically his book, The Art of Spending Money.
Such a fantastic read.
It is, and he has this one specific section, chapter 2, which is literally titled, "May I Have Your Attention, Please?"
Which perfectly sums it up.
It does, and it just completely dismantles the illusion that we all fall for. So our mission today is to unpack the psychological roots of our financial desires based on this chapter.
And this is so crucial for anyone listening. If you are an entrepreneur, a business builder, or honestly, just someone trying to carve out a meaningful life without burning out.
Yeah, you have to understand this. It is non-negotiable.
Because if you don't audit the psychology behind your ambition, you risk spending decades building this massively successful empire, accumulating all the markers of success.
And then what? You reach the summit and realize you are totally emotionally bankrupt.
Exactly. You climb the mountain, you bloody your hands, you sacrifice your relationships to get to the peak, and then you look around and realize you're standing on the completely wrong mountain.
Oh, that is such a bleak image, but so accurate. The tragedy isn't failing to get what you want right. The tragedy is getting exactly what you thought you wanted.
And realizing it just doesn't do the job. It doesn't fix the internal feeling.
So let's start with the root cause here, because I think people listening might assume this is just a modern cultural glitch, right?
Oh, the whole blame social media thing.
Exactly. We tend to blame social media for this obsession with status and stuff. We point our fingers at the influencer economy or reality TV.
We complain about how superficial society has become in the 21st century.
Right. But it is incredibly convenient to blame the algorithm, isn't it?
It is, but it's historically inaccurate. This is a deeply ingrained human hardware issue. It is not a recent software update.
I love that phrasing.
To understand the sheer depth of this illusion, this automatic equation our brains make, that more money equals nicer stuff, and nicer stuff automatically equals more respect, we have to look way back.
Like, how far back are we talking here?
We are talking about the writings of Adam Smith, the godfather of modern economics himself.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, he was writing about this specific psychological trap all the way back in 1759.
1759. Okay, we are talking about a world lit by candles. People are relying on horse-drawn carriages here.
Right. Long before anyone was leasing a sports car at a 12% interest rate, just a flex on a timeline.
So what was he noticing back then? Because it obviously wasn't Instagram likes.
Well, in 1759, Smith asked a profound, almost existential question about human motivation. He basically looked around at all the frantic economic activity of his time, and he asked, to what purpose is all the toil and bustle of this world? What is the end of avarice and ambition, of the pursuit of wealth, of power and preeminence?
He had quite a way with words, but he wasn't saying it was just to survive, right?
No, and that is the kicker.
Yeah.
He immediately dismissed the idea that it was for basic survival.
Interesting.
Even in the 18th century, he noted that the lowest-wage workers generally had the absolute necessities of nature covered. They had meager food, they had basic shelter.
So survival was mostly secured for the working class, at least on a base level.
Exactly. So if the frantic hustle wasn't about staying alive, what was it actually for?
And his conclusion wasn't that people just, really loved the craftsmanship of a slightly nicer wooden carriage.
Not at all. Smith realized that the drive for wealth is fundamentally about visibility.
Visibility.
Yeah. He wrote that the purpose is to be observed, to be attended to be taken notice of with sympathy, complacency, and approbation.
Approbation meaning approval.
Right. We value the attention that the wealth brings significantly more than the comfort of the physical items the wealth buys.
Okay, hold on. Let me play devil's advocate here because I know there are listeners thinking this exact thing right now.
Go for it.
What if I genuinely just appreciate German engineering? Or what if I buy a bespoke suit because I deeply respect the craftsmanship, the fabric, the whole history of the tailoring?
Sure.
Are we really arguing that every single luxury purchase is just some pathetic cry for attention?
That is the crucial nuance, and it is a brilliant pushback.
Right.
No, not every purchase is a desperate cry for attention. There's absolutely a place for appreciating aesthetics and engineering.
Okay, good. Because I like nice things sometimes, just because they are nice.
We all do. But the diagnostic test here is utility versus signaling.
Utility versus signaling. Break that down for me.
If you buy a beautifully engineered sports car and you take it to a private track on the weekends, just to experience the sheer visceral thrill of the machine's capabilities, entirely by yourself, that is utility. That is appreciating the engineering. But if we are completely honest with ourselves, how many luxury purchases pass the desert island test?
Wait, what is the desert island test? I haven't heard that one.
So imagine if you were the last person on Earth, or if you lived on a deserted island with perfectly paved roads but absolutely zero other human beings to see you.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Just me and the pelicans.
Right. Would you still buy the neon green Lamborghini? Or would you buy a highly comfortable, reliable truck?
Oh, man. I would definitely just buy a truck. Or an SUV.
Exactly. Because if the joy of the purchase evaporates the absolute moment the audience is removed, you didn't buy a car, you bought a prop for a performance.
Wow, you bought a prop for a performance. That makes total sense.
I want to offer an analogy here to kind of map Adam Smith's 1759 observation onto our current reality.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Buying a wildly expensive luxury item purely for status is essentially the exact same neurobiological behavior as posting a heavily filtered, highly curated photo online.
Oh, that is a great comparison. Think about what happens in your brain when you post that photo. You do not actually care about the digital pixels that make up the image on the screen.
Right. The image itself provides no inherent utility to you. You aren't staring at the photo marveling at the color balance.
No. What you are entirely obsessively focused on is the notification bell.
You are waiting for that red bubble to appear.
Exactly. You are seeking the reaction. You are harvesting attention. The luxury watch, the massive house, the designer shoes. For a lot of people, those aren't items of utility or comfort.
They are physical notification bells.
Yes. You are wearing them or driving them to force the world to click like on your life in real time.
And we can actually take the neuroscience of that notification bell even deeper. Why is that red bubble or that stranger's gaze so intoxicating?
Yeah, why are we wired like that?
Alain de Botton explores this beautifully in his concept of status anxiety.
Status anxiety. Okay.
He argues that our intense, agonizing desire to climb the social and economic hierarchy isn't actually about the material goods.
Right.
And it's not even primarily about the raw power we can wield over others. He suggests it is fundamentally rooted in the amount of love we stand to receive.
Love. That feels like a pretty massive leap. I mean, we are talking about spending money on shiny objects, and we are jumping straight to love.
I know it sounds like a stretch.
Explain the mechanics there. How does the brain conflate buying a Rolex with being loved?
It requires looking at our evolutionary past. For hundreds of thousands of years, human beings lived in small tribal groups.
Right, hunter-gatherer stuff.
Exactly. And in those groups, your survival was entirely dependent on your social standing. If you were high status, if you were respected and valued by the tribe, you were protected.
You got the best food, the best cave.
You were fed, you were cared for when sick. You were, in a very practical, survival-oriented sense, loved by the community.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
But if you lost status, if you were ignored or discarded, you were exiled. And exile meant death.
So our brains evolved to view social rank as literally a matter of life and death.
Yes. And fast forward to today. The hardware hasn't changed at all. Our brains still subconsciously equate high visible status with safety, inclusion, and love.
And conversely, we equate low status with being ignored, which the primitive brain interprets as a mortal threat.
Spot on. So when we feel insecure, or when we feel a lack of deep, authentic connection in our lives, the primal brain panics.
It sounds the alarm.
It says, quick, we need to signal our value to the tribe so they don't abandon us. And in a hyper-capitalist society, the easiest, most legible signal of value is money.
It's the universal language of status.
Exactly. We view nice stuff as the guaranteed ticket to the attention and ultimately the love we desperately crave.
So the practical takeaway for you, the listener, right here isn't just, stop buying nice things.
Right. That's too simplistic.
It's about conducting a ruthless internal audit. Before your next major purchase, whether it's a car, a home renovation, or a luxury piece of clothing, you have to pause and interrogate your own motivation.
You really have to ask yourself the hard questions.
You have to ask, am I buying this because of its actual utility? Will the comfort, the function, or the aesthetic beauty of this item genuinely bring me joy if no one else ever sees it?
The desert island test.
Exactly. Or, and you have to be brutally honest with yourself here, am I secretly purchasing a billboard? Am I just buying a very expensive advertisement to broadcast my success in the subconscious hope that people will value me more?
And if you realize it is a billboard, you have to confront the reality that you are using a financial tool to try and solve an emotional deficit.
Wow.
You are trying to use a hammer to fix a leaky faucet. It's just the wrong tool for the job.
But wait, if we know buying the car doesn't win us real love, and if intellectually we can recognize the absurdity of the billboard, why does the urge feel so impossible to resist in the moment?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. What is happening in our brains right before we swipe the card that overrides our logical understanding of this trap?
That brings us to a brilliant framework that explains why we keep falling for it. Relying on material stuff to gain respect is the psychological equivalent of eating junk food.
The junk food of admiration. Okay, let's break that down. Think about actual junk food.
Yeah, like Oreos.
Why do we eat a sleeve of Oreos when we know a salad is better for us? We eat it because it's incredibly tempting, it's easily accessible, and for about 5 minutes, your brain is flooded with a massive immediate spike of dopamine.
It feels amazing.
Right. But what happens an hour later?
The biological crash.
The crash. You have a headache. You are completely devoid of energy. Your body is still actually malnourished because you consumed empty calories. And now you have an added layer of guilt.
And the psychological parallel is identical.
Yeah.
Spending money on flashy things is the junk food of seeking human connection.
Because it feels incredible in the exact moment the valet parks your new car out front.
Oh yeah, you get the dopamine hit of people turning their heads, but 30 days later, the thrill is gone. The payments remain, and you are still emotionally malnourished.
That is such a vivid way to look at it. To understand exactly why this strategy fails so predictably, we can measure the junk food of attention against three specific variables.
Yes, effectiveness, durability, and audience.
Okay, let's tackle variable number one. How effective is it?
Well, if we're talking purely about immediate effectiveness, spending money on status symbols is dangerously effective.
Yeah, I imagine so.
It is unquestionably the quickest way to force someone to look at you. It is highly visible, it is completely public, and here's the crucial part. It requires absolutely zero character or social skill.
Right. You don't have to be a good person to buy a nice watch.
Precisely. Building real respect takes time. It requires you to be funny or deeply empathetic or a fantastic listener.
It requires vulnerability and consistency over years.
And that is hard work. Buying a status symbol is a shortcut. You just need a high credit limit.
So true.
You swipe the card, you acquire the item, and the attention is generated instantaneously.
So it scores incredibly high on immediate effectiveness, but then we hit variable number two, which is durability.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to push back a little here because some things do hold their status,
Right.
like a Patek Philippe watch or an original Birkin bag. Those maintain their aura for decades.
Yeah.
Isn't that durable status?
The object might maintain its cultural aura, absolutely. But the attention you receive for owning it decays rapidly.
Ah, okay.
This is the hedonic treadmill in action. On day one, you walk into the office with the new watch, and people are shocked. They ask about it, they compliment it, you get a massive hit of validation.
A month later.
A month later, it just becomes the watch you always wear. Your coworkers adapt to the new baseline.
They get used to it.
A year later, it doesn't even register in their consciousness. The shock value wears off incredibly fast, even if the item itself remains culturally significant.
So the dopamine hit has a very short half-life.
Exactly. You have purchased a depreciating asset, not necessarily in terms of its resale value, but in terms of its ability to generate the attention you bought it for.
That's a great distinction. To maintain that initial level of shock and awe, you would have to constantly upgrade. You have to buy the next bigger, shinier thing. It becomes an exhaustion loop.
Which brings us to the third variable, and honestly, this is the one that completely shatters the illusion for me.
The audience.
Yes. Who is actually the audience for this performance? Who's paying attention?
This is the most devastating realization of the whole chapter. The people whose attention you capture with expensive, flashy stuff are almost exclusively strangers.
Let's paint a picture of this for the listener because it's so important. I want you to think about a real-world scenario.
I picture this.
You are sitting at a sidewalk cafe, having a coffee, and you hear this aggressive roar. You look up, and someone drives by in a custom $300,000 supercar. The engine is screaming, the paint is flawless.
We have all been there.
What is your actual internal monologue in that specific moment? Do you honestly look at the driver and think, wow, what a magnificent human being. That person must have incredible integrity. I deeply respect and admire their character.
It never crosses your mind. Not for a fraction of a second.
Never. You don't admire the person at all. You bypass the human being entirely and gawk at the car.
You're just looking at the machine.
And usually what happens next is this subtle mental shift. You immediately project yourself into the driver's seat. You think, man, if I had that car, people would think I was awesome.
Exactly. You are not experiencing respect for the owner. You are experiencing envy for the object.
And you're imagining how that object could serve your own status needs.
The tragedy of the driver is that they think they have purchased respect, but they have actually just purchased the role of a mannequin.
A mannequin.
Yeah, they are just a fleshy prop displaying an object of envy.
A fleshy prop displaying an object of envy.
A fleshy prop displaying an object of envy. That is brutal, but it's so accurate. I mean, does your spouse notice your car after the first week?
No.
Do your kids care about the brand of your watch? Or do they just want you to get down on the floor and play with them?
They couldn't care less about the watch. Do your closest friends, the people who actually know your flaws and love you anyway, do they measure your worth by the square footage of your house?
Of course not. The people who actually matter, the people whose deep, sustained respect you genuinely crave, they do not use your spending habits as the metric for their admiration.
Right. They care if you are kind, if you are reliable, if you are present when things get difficult.
So the practical takeaway here is that You have to stop trying to purchase durability.
Recognize that swiping a credit card is the absolute least effective lever you can pull if you want sustained respect from the people who populate your actual life.
It might get a stranger at a stoplight to turn their head for 3 seconds, sure.
But it does absolutely nothing to solidify the foundation of a real relationship. It's the difference between a flashbulb and the sun.
Oh, I like that.
One blinds you for a second, but the other actually sustains life.
That transition from the external flashbulb to the internal sun is really crucial here. Because once we accept that the external audience, the strangers, are just experiencing envy, we have to turn the lens inward.
We have to look at the internal landscape of our own minds.
Exactly. And specifically, we have to talk about the psychology of pride.
Right. And this brings us to a framework from researcher Jennifer Wallace, distinguishing between two vastly different types of pride.
Intrinsic pride and extrinsic pride.
Yes. Let's dig into that because it seems foundational to this whole problem.
This distinction is the master key to understanding why some highly successful people are deeply fulfilled and others are utterly miserable.
So what is intrinsic pride?
Intrinsic pride is self-generated. It occurs when you are authentically proud of who you are and what you have accomplished, based entirely on your own internal standards.
So it's not about what anyone else thinks.
Not at all. It comes from knowing, quietly and privately, that you put in grueling hard work, or that you acted with integrity when no one was looking, or that you mastered a complex skill just for the sake of mastery.
It's quiet. You don't need an audience to applaud for you to feel the warmth of intrinsic pride.
Exactly. Extrinsic pride, on the other hand, is what psychologists sometimes call hubristic pride.
Hubristic, like hubris.
Yes. This is a fragile, volatile pride that is entirely dependent on external validation. It relies on other people's reactions to dictate how you are allowed to feel about yourself.
Oh, that sounds exhausting.
It is. If the crowd is clapping, your self-worth soars. If they stop clapping, or worse, if they look away, your self-worth plummets into the abyss.
You have essentially outsourced your self-esteem to the mob.
Precisely. You gave away the keys to your own emotional state.
Morgan Housel actually shares a very vulnerable personal anecdote about this in the chapter, and I think it perfectly illustrates the desperation of extrinsic pride.
His story about the Ferrari.
Yes. He talks about his early obsession with wanting a Ferrari. He describes himself during that period as a young, dumb kid.
His words, not ours.
Right. He admits he had zero refined social skills, he hadn't developed any highly valuable job skills yet, and he didn't have much to offer the world in terms of wisdom or lived experience.
He was just starting out.
But his desire for a Ferrari was absolute, all-consuming. Why? Why that specific car when he had nothing else?
Because it was a mechanism of overcompensation.
Yeah.
When you lack the internal substance, the hard-earned wisdom, the humor, the empathy, the mastery of a craft, to command respect organically, the ego panics.
It knows it's running empty.
It realizes it cannot win the game of intrinsic value, so it defaults to the last remaining option.
You default to the cheat code.
Exactly.
You think, I can't impress you with my mind, and I can't comfort you with my character, so look at my incredibly loud car. Beep, beep, broom, broom.
That's literally it. It is a desperate plea for extrinsic pride, because the intrinsic tank is running on fumes.
But isn't some level of external validation normal? I mean, we are social creatures. Is it really that toxic to want people to admire what we've built or what we've bought?
That's a fair question.
Yeah.
It's totally normal to want some validation.
Okay.
But the danger lies in the bandwidth problem. And this is arguably the most terrifying psychological concept we're going to cover today.
The bandwidth problem. Okay. Tell me about that.
Psychologist Tim Kasser's research points out that pursuing these two types of pride is not a parallel track. It is a zero-sum game when it comes to our cognitive and emotional bandwidth.
We only have a finite amount of psychological energy to expend each day.
Exactly. You only have so much juice in the battery.
Let's really explore the sheer, exhausting reality of the bandwidth problem for a second. Imagine the daily mental math required to maintain a life optimized for extrinsic pride.
It's staggering.
If you are constantly chasing material status, you are spending massive amounts of cognitive load strategizing how to afford the next symbol.
You are stressed about the interest rates on the leases.
You are agonizing over which country club to join and calculating how to network with the right people once you're there.
You are constantly monitoring social media to see if your peers are outpacing you.
You are hiding your financial anxiety behind a veneer of effortless success. The cognitive load is staggering. It is a full-time, emotionally draining job just to keep the mask from slipping.
And here's the tragedy of the zero-sum game. All of that mental energy, all that bandwidth you are burning to maintain the extrinsic facade is energy you are not spending on the things that build intrinsic pride.
Right, because you just don't have any left.
You cannot cultivate deep, patient empathy for your spouse if your brain is spinning with anxiety about your social standing.
You cannot be a truly present, playful parent if you are constantly checking your phone for business updates to fund the lifestyle.
You aren't using your energy to read, to learn, to develop your own intellect or your sense of humor.
To tie it back to the junk food analogy, if you constantly gorge yourself on the empty calories of material status, you completely ruin your appetite for the nourishing food of real human connection and personal growth.
You are too full of sugar to eat the vegetables that actually build muscle.
That is exactly it, and the data backs us up. Following this path, prioritizing extrinsic pride while starving your intrinsic development, reliably leads to higher rates of anxiety, depression, and overall misery.
You successfully build a gilded cage, but you are still suffocating inside it.
So how do we break the cycle? How do we use this understanding practically in our own lives?
You have to start using your material desires as a diagnostic tool. Treat your sudden urges to splurge as a warning light on the dashboard of your internal engine.
I really like that. So instead of just blindly swiping the card, you pause and read the diagnostic code.
Yes, if you suddenly find that your desire for flashy stuff is skyrocketing,
Like if you find yourself spending hours configuring a luxury SUV online,
or obsessing over a watch that costs more than a year of college tuition. Do not judge the desire, but interrogate it.
use it as a trigger to stop and ask yourself, what internal trait am I currently feeling insecure about? What am I trying to compensate for?
Right. Am I feeling undervalued at work? Am I feeling disconnected from my partner? Have I stopped developing my own kindness or patience?
Almost always, when the external volume of our spending gets louder, it's because an internal voice is feeling desperately inadequate.
You're trying to buy a bandage for an invisible wound.
Which leads us to what might be the most liberating concept in this entire discussion. It's an idea that completely reframes how we measure our own value, and it provides a roadmap out of the bandwidth trap.
A 98% rule.
Yes, the 98% rule.
This is where we shift from diagnosing the problem to actually finding the cure.
The author shares a story about a friend of his. And this friend is, by all accounts, a fantastic human being. But he was going through a period of intense depression, feeling incredibly lesser than his peers.
And why was that?
Simply because he didn't earn a massive top-tier salary. He looked around, saw his peers buying the boats and the vacation homes, and he felt like he was fundamentally failing the game of life.
He was using the wrong measuring stick for his own worth.
Totally. And the author's response to him is so profound in its simplicity. He tells his friend, look at your actual life. You are a devoted present dad. You are a fiercely loyal husband.
You are an honest, hard worker who shows up every day.
You are a helpful, genuinely funny friend who brings joy to the people around you.
Yeah.
Doing those things, just being a fundamentally good, reliable, emotionally intelligent human being, earns you 98% of the respect and admiration that another human being is capable of giving you.
98%. The vast, overwhelming majority of the pie.
Yes, being incredibly wealthy, having the massive salary, the insane cars, the tailored suits, that might bump the dial from 98% to 99%.
Money, in the grand scheme of human connection, moves the needle barely 1%.
That is just wild to think about, 1%.
This concept aligns perfectly with a framework popularized by the columnist David Brooks. He makes a brilliant distinction between two sets of values we pursue in life.
Resume virtues and eulogy virtues.
Exactly.
Let's define those, because the friction between the two is where most of our anxiety lives.
Resume virtues are the metrics of the marketplace. They are the quantifiable data points of your economic utility.
Like your salary, your job title, your net worth.
The prestigious brand of the company you work for, the square footage of your home, the horsepower of your car. They are the things you put on a piece of paper to convince a stranger to hire you.
Or to convince a bank to give you a loan.
Right. They are the 1%.
Okay, so then what are eulogy virtues?
Eulogy virtues are the metrics of the soul. They are the things people talk about at your funeral.
Wow.
They are respect, admiration, unconditional love, profound kindness, courage in the face of adversity, unwavering honesty.
They capture the essence of who you were as a human being, not what you accumulated as an earner. To really drive the reality of this home for you listening, I want you to try an exercise right now. It's a bit morbid, but I promise you it clarifies your priorities faster than anything else.
Reverse obituary exercise.
Yes. I want you to imagine right now the ideal version of your own obituary. When it's all over, what do you desperately want the people who knew you best to say about you?
If you are honest with yourself, the answers are strikingly universal.
They really are. You want your obituary to say they were deeply, fiercely loved. They were universally respected by their
They were
peers.
a well of wisdom, a pillar of strength during hard times.
They had an infectious laugh, and they were an endlessly devoted partner and parent.
Now, consider what will absolutely never be included in that ideal obituary.
No one in the history of human existence has ever wanted their final summary to read they were deeply loved, and also, we must note, their luxury SUV had 600 horsepower and a custom leather interior.
Right.
Or they will be sorely missed, especially their wedding ring, which was a flawless decolor 4 carats.
Or they were a pillar of the community. And let us never forget that they used imported, hand-cut Italian marble for their kitchen island.
It sounds absurd, almost comical when you say it out loud.
It is completely absurd. Because when you zoom out from the daily grind and look at the timeline of an entire human life, you inherently know that the resume virtues, the material line items, are completely meaningless in the face of the eulogy virtues.
They are dust.
And yet, look at how we behave. We spend an inordinate amount of our daily lives, our precious time, our stress, and our cognitive bandwidth agonizing over the marble countertops and the horsepower.
We exhaust ourselves optimizing for the 1% at the direct expense of the 98%.
We trade eulogy virtues for resume virtues and think we're getting a bargain.
So the practical takeaway here is a mandate for how you allocate the rest of your life's energy. You must optimize your life for the 98%.
You have to consciously, deliberately focus your time, your emotional bandwidth, and yes, your money, on developing and supporting the traits that actually populate that ideal obituary.
You have to stop sacrificing the 98% of your soul to chase the 1% of resume line items that fade the literal second you leave the room.
It requires a massive reprioritization. You have to actively choose to stop playing in the game that the billboard economy insists is the only game in town.
So let's pull all of these threads together. We've journeyed from Adam Smith's 18th century observations on the ancient illusion of wealth.
Through the neurological trap of the junk food of attention.
We've explored the exhausting zero-sum game of the bandwidth problem, and finally, the liberating clarity of the 98% rule and our eulogy virtues.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. If we distill all of this down, what is the absolute soul of this chapter?
The soul of this chapter is a radical redefinition of wealth itself. It is the profound realization that true wealth is a quiet internal asset, not a loud external performance.
A quiet internal asset. I love that.
Yes. If you feel an overwhelming, constant anxiety driving you to have your possessions speak for you, to let your car, your watch, or your zip code announce your value to the world before you even open your mouth, you are likely bankrupt in the very things that make a life truly meaningful.
You are using external volume to mask an agonizing internal silence.
The inescapable truth is that you cannot buy love and you cannot buy lasting, durable respect.
Morgan Housel brings in the ultimate heavy hitter to hammer this final point home. Warren Buffett.
The perfect example.
This is arguably one of the most successful investors in human history. A man whose resume virtues are virtually unmatched, a man who could literally buy any physical object on the planet without blinking.
And after a lifetime of unimaginable wealth, what is his conclusion on this?
Buffett says the ultimate test of how you've lived your life is how many of the people you want to have love you actually do love you.
Such a simple, profound metric.
And he follows it up with a reality check that should sober up anyone still trying to buy their way into admiration. He says, you'd like to think you could write a check, but it doesn't work that way. The more you give love away, the more you get.
If Warren Buffett is looking back on his life and telling you that the ultimate financial tool cannot buy the only things that actually matter, we should probably all stop trying to write that check.
The great irony is that the harder you try to write that check, the louder you scream for attention through your purchases, the further away true, quiet respect gets.
Exactly. You push away the very thing you are desperate to attract.
So now that you know the attention you've been buying is mostly a fleeting, exhausting illusion, you have to ask yourself a terrifying but ultimately liberating question.
What's that?
What actually happens when a person realizes they finally have enough?
Oh, that's the real challenge, isn't it?
Join us on our next deep dive as we explore a Mexican fisherman who accidentally figured out the secret to infinite wealth simply by realizing that the ultimate financial asset is not needing to impress anyone at all. If I handed you $1 million today, like no strings attached, tax-free, wired straight into your checking account before the sentence even finishes, would it actually make you happier? Or would it just buy you a much more expensive, high-definition version of the exact dissatisfaction you're feeling right now?
It is the ultimate question of the modern age, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we spend our entire adult lives, and arguably our childhoods too, chasing this arbitrary, ever-moving numerical finish
Yeah,
line.
completely.
We are absolutely convinced that once our net worth hits a certain threshold, this physiological switch flips in our brains, and we finally unlock the right to experience durable, uninterrupted happiness.
We really do operate under this deeply ingrained, almost mythological belief that financial wealth is the cure-all for the human condition. We tell ourselves these little stories, like if I can just secure this massive raise, or if I just close this Series B round, or if I can just finally close on that 5-bedroom house in the right zip code, then I have arrived.
Right. We treat wealth as a destination.
Exactly. We treat it as a destination. But the reality we are looking at today completely shatters that illusion. The source material we are diving into reveals a pretty brutal truth, which is that getting what you want is an entirely different biological and psychological mechanism from actually wanting what you have. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, what you are about to learn today is the fundamental, often misunderstood difference between financial wealth, which is literally just a number on a balance sheet, and psychological wealth, which is your actual lived experience of reality.
Your day-to-day existence.
Precisely. You are going to learn why mastering your own internal desires is a far more controllable, sustainable, and ultimately lucrative skill than simply trying to brute force an increase in your income. We're exploring the core thesis from Chapter 3 of Morgan Housel's book, The Art of Spending Money.
It's such a good chapter.
It really is. The chapter is titled, The Happiest People I Know, and the central argument we are dissecting is profound. It's basically this. If your expectations grow faster than your income, you will never, ever be happy with your money, regardless of how many zeros are in your bank account.
And this isn't just like philosophical musing. This matters deeply for you listening to us right now. Whether you are grinding to build a startup, navigating corporate executive politics, or just trying to figure out how to live a genuinely good, meaningful life without burning out by the time you're 40.
Oh, totally. It applies to everyone.
Because beneath all the tactical financial advice out there, what we are really talking about today is leverage. We spend immense amounts of energy trying to hack our daily productivity or, optimize our portfolio allocations by fractions of a percent.
But we completely ignore the heaviest anchor dragging down our quality of life, which is our own aggressively escalating expectations.
Yes, we focus obsessively on the external math of our bank accounts, but we remain completely illiterate regarding the internal psychology of our spending and our wanting.
As the source material points out, in a classroom setting, finance is taught as a hard science. It has clean formulas, historical data, predictable models. But in the real world, spending money and experiencing the results of that spending is an art form.
It's so messy.
It is messy. It's deeply emotional and driven by cognitive biases that most of us don't even realize we are suffering from.
I think to really get to the bottom of this, we have to look at the mechanics of our own imaginations. Like, how do we actually dream about the future?
That's a great question.
Right. When you sit back, close your eyes, and dream about a scenario where you are unequivocally happier than you are today, what are the visuals that pop into your head? Usually you imagine yourself with a new, beautiful house, or you picture an incredibly elevated lifestyle.
You see yourself effortlessly breezing through a private airport terminal.
Exactly. Or staying at a secluded 5-star resort, sitting at a Michelin-starred restaurant, and never once having to glance at the right side of the menu to check the prices. You automatically assume that the stuff, the tangible, expensive environment, is the active ingredient that is manufacturing the happiness.
But here is the psychological twist that the author reveals. And we really need to spend some time exploring the mechanics of this because it changes everything. When you picture that luxurious future, what you are actually doing is imagining a future version of yourself who is finally content with those things.
Oh, wow, yeah. You're projecting a state of mind onto a physical object.
Exactly. You aren't just dreaming of the physical fiberglass and mahogany of a 90-foot yacht. You are dreaming of the neural state of sitting on the deck of that yacht and finally, for the first time in your life, saying, this is enough, the chase is over, I don't need to strive for anything else.
We conflate the acquisition of the material object with the cessation of our internal desire. We think the object causes the desire to stop.
We do. And we do this because, on a biological level, the feeling of desire is inherently uncomfortable. It is a state of lack. When you desire something, your brain is actively generating a signal that your current environment is insufficient.
It's like a survival mechanism, right?
It is. If an early hominid didn't experience the discomfort of desiring food or shelter, they died. So we are hardwired to feel wanting as an itch that must be scratched. But in the modern world, where our basic survival needs are largely met, we misinterpret this biological discomfort.
We assume that the only way to eliminate the feeling of lack is to just fill it to the brim with material acquisition.
Right. But true happiness, as outlined in the text, isn't the presence of luxury. It is simply the psychological state where nothing is missing. It actually has very little to do with the objective reality of the lifestyle you are living. It has everything to do with whether your brain has temporarily suspended its habit of generating a feeling of deficit.
You know, it's like thinking a brand new $300 pair of professional carbon-plated running shoes will instantly make you a marathoner.
That's a perfect analogy.
When you're standing in the store looking at those shoes, what you're actually craving is the internal emotional feeling of having just crossed the finish line of a grueling race. You want the endorphins, the pride, the self-identity of being a dedicated athlete.
You don't actually just want the foam, the mesh, and the laces.
No, you want the satisfaction that you've culturally associated with those items, but you buy the shoes, you bring them home, you put them on your feet, and the brutal reality hits you. You still have to wake up at 5 a.m. in the freezing rain and run the 26 miles. The shoes were just a prop. They didn't give you the finish line.
And to take that running shoe analogy a step further into the psychology of it, when you buy the shoes, your brain actually gets a massive temporary spike in dopamine. You feel a rush of excitement and motivation.
But it doesn't last.
It doesn't, because dopamine isn't the chemical of having something. It is the chemical of anticipating something.
Yeah.
So the moment the transaction is complete and the shoes are sitting in your closet, the dopamine crashes.
The biological equation hasn't actually changed.
Exactly. You are still the same person with the same cardiovascular fitness who hasn't run the miles. You bought the prop, hoping it would magically install the psychological state. And when it fails, your brain immediately starts looking for the next prop to buy to recreate that anticipation spike.
Which just keeps us trapped in the cycle of buying and wanting, never actually arriving at the contentment we thought we were purchasing.
Precisely. And to break this cycle, the source material introduces a fascinating perspective from the early 20th century French novelist Marcel Proust.
Oh, this part is brilliant.
It is. Proust had a profound understanding of how human attention shapes our reality. In the text, he notes that when you walk around an ordinary kitchen, you have a choice in how you perceive it. You can look around and say to yourself, this is interesting, this is grand, this is beautiful like a Chardin.
And for context for listeners who might not be deep into art history, Jean-Baptiste Simeon Chardin was a renowned French painter from the 18th century, incredibly famous for his still life paintings.
Right, at a time when other artists were painting massive, dramatic historical battles or portraits of royalty.
Yeah, Chardin took incredibly mundane, everyday objects, a cracked bowl, a half-eaten loaf of bread, a copper water pot, a dead rabbit, and he painted them with such intense reverence, focus, and mastery of light that they were elevated to high art.
He forced the viewer to actually look at the profound beauty in the totally ordinary things they ignored every single day.
And Proust's argument is that you possess the exact same cognitive capacity as Chardin's audience. You can walk into your own completely ordinary, maybe outdated apartment kitchen, and you can choose to view it through that exact same lens of reverence.
You can consciously direct your attention to appreciate the absolute miracle that is right in front of you. The fact that you can turn a metal handle and clean, drinkable water endlessly flows out. The fact that you have a magical insulated box humming in the corner, keeping your fresh produce from spoiling.
Even just the specific way the morning light hits the dust motes above the sink.
Yes. Proust is saying you can choose to manufacture the feeling of this is enough internally by changing your attention rather than dwelling on the multi-million-dollar Architectural Digest dream kitchen that you lack. The art of contentment is about intensely appreciating the reality in front of you rather than letting your mind wander to the imaginary reality you don't possess.
Okay, hold on. Let me jump in and challenge this premise because I can hear the listener practically screaming at their device right now. And frankly, I struggle with this too.
Go for it.
If I just walk around my tiny, cramped, outdated apartment kitchen and force my brain to say, Wow, this peeling formica countertop is a transcendent masterpiece. Isn't that just a massive cope?
A lot of people think that, yeah.
Doesn't that mean I am just giving up on progress?
Hmm.
If desire is what drives us to build, to invent, to improve our living standards, does appreciating what is right in front of us mean we have to completely sacrifice our ambition?
That's a fair question.
Like, are we just supposed to passively settle for whatever mediocre situation we find ourselves in and stop trying to build better companies, earn more money, or provide a better life for our families?
This is the critical friction point, and it's essential we address it deeply. It is a very common trap to confuse contentment with complacency.
Right.
But there is a massive structural difference in the brain between passive settling and active appreciation. The text is absolutely not telling you to kill your ambition or to stop participating in the free market. It is telling you to decouple your baseline happiness from the outcome of that ambition.
Okay, so separating the two.
Exactly. The goal is to train your psychology to reach a state where you can honestly say, I am good, I am fundamentally whole and satisfied with what I have and who I am right now, while simultaneously playing the game of life, business, and creation.
So it's the difference between operating out of fear and deficit versus operating out of joy and surplus.
Yes, beautifully put.
It is the difference between telling yourself, I'm a failure, and I will only be permitted to feel happy and worthy when I finally get the promotion and the new house, versus saying, I am perfectly happy, safe, and content in this apartment today, but I am an active, creative human being. So it would be a really fun, engaging challenge to build a business that might allow me to buy a house tomorrow.
That is the exact distinction. Let's look at it through the lens of behavioral economics. If you operate from a state of deficit, like, I must achieve X to be happy, you are highly vulnerable to anxiety, burnout, and irrational decision-making.
Because you're desperate.
Exactly. You will take on bad debt, you will compromise your ethics, and you will destroy your health because your brain believes that survival is contingent on that future acquisition.
Wow.
But if you operate from a state of surplus, I already have everything I need to be happy, but let's see how far I can take this. You make a better decisions. You are playing with house money, psychologically speaking.
You can take calculated risks without the existential dread of failure.
When you are truly content, you are no longer desperately chasing happiness. You are simply bringing the happiness you already possess into new environments and challenges. Nirvana, as the author elegantly describes it in this chapter, isn't about reaching a specific magical financial benchmark where the math finally adds up.
It's not a dollar amount.
No, it is simply whoever gets to a point of looking around and saying, I'm good. That is the person who takes the happiness crown.
It really is the ultimate psychological mountaintop. And it requires immense self-awareness because you have to recognize that the dopamine game of constantly wanting more is a game designed never to be won.
It's a rigged casino.
It really is. There is always a next level you are striving for. There is always a slightly bigger house. There is always someone flying on a slightly newer private jet. The horizon constantly recedes the faster you run toward it.
So the only way to actually win the game of wanting more is to recognize the trap and refuse to play it entirely.
And that profound realization leads us directly to one of the most striking and memorable comparisons in the entire book.
Yes, the grandmother and the billionaires.
To illustrate this difference between financial reality and psychological reality, the author contrasts the life of his own grandmother-in-law with the lives of half a dozen actual verified billionaires he has personally interacted with throughout his career.
What's fascinating here is, well, the stark contrast in their actual lived experiences.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because in our culture, you hear the word billionaire, and you immediately reflexively assume they have beaten the video game of life. We worship that status.
We completely do.
But the contrast the author paints between these two ends of the financial spectrum is absolutely stunning. Let's look at the grandmother-in-law first. The author details how she spent 3 full decades in retirement with almost no money to her name. She lived entirely off a meager monthly Social Security check.
The author explicitly states that, by any official government metric, she was technically living right on the verge of poverty.
From a purely financial balance sheet perspective, yes. Her bank account was incredibly small.
Yeah.
Her purchasing power in the modern economy was near zero.
Right, but, and this is the massive but, of the entire chapter she found immense, profound, daily joy in the absolute simplest things. She spent hours meticulously tending to a tiny garden. She read stacks of books that she borrowed for free from the local public library.
In her own mind, she possessed absolutely everything she could ever need or want. She had very little in terms of material assets, but crucially, she desired even less. Her want was lower than her half-half.
What's fascinating here is what that specific ratio did for her baseline psychological state. She wasn't just tolerating her life, she was thriving internally. The author makes a staggering observation. He notes that out of the half-dozen billionaires he has met and spent time with in his life, people who sit at the absolute pinnacle of global capitalism, not a single one of them was as genuinely, consistently happy as his grandmother-in-law. Not one.
We really need to pause and let that reality absorb. We are talking about individuals who can literally buy private islands on a whim.
They can buy professional sports franchises because they are bored on a Tuesday.
Yes. They have access to the best healthcare, the best food, the most exclusive experiences the human race has to offer. And they are being vastly out-happied on a daily basis by an elderly woman living on the verge of poverty, armed with nothing but a library card and a trowel for her garden. How is that biologically possible?
It is entirely possible and frankly predictable when you understand the concept of psychological wealth. This is the core operating system of human contentment. Her incredibly low expectations gave her a massive compounding reserve of psychological wealth. The billionaires, despite their infinite, inexhaustible financial wealth, were severely bankrupt in psychological wealth.
It's wild to think of a billionaire as bankrupt, but psychologically they are.
And the text provides a beautiful, elegantly simple formula to explain this phenomenon. It states, all happiness in life is simply the gap between your expectations and your circumstances.
The gap between your expectations and your circumstances. Okay, we need to spend some real time breaking this math down for the listener. Let's plug some hypothetical numbers into this formula.
Let's do it.
Let's say your circumstances are an absolute 10 out of 10. You are one of the billionaires. You fly exclusively private. You have a staff of personal chefs and trainers. You own homes on 3 continents. The world bends to your will.
A literal 10 out of 10.
But because human nature adapts so quickly, your expectations have inflated to a 12 out of 10. You expect unquestioning loyalty, you expect your investments to yield 30% annually, and you expect to be the most important person in any room you enter. According to the formula, even with a 10 out of 10 reality, you are operating at a deficit of -2. You are in the red.
Exactly. You are psychologically bankrupt despite being financially invincible.
Yeah.
And the critical thing to understand about the human brain is that it does not care about objective reality, it only cares about the gap.
The relative difference.
Your brain does not wake up and say, wow, I am objectively richer than 99.99% of all humanity that has ever lived, therefore I will release serotonin all day. It doesn't work that way. The brain operates on relative positioning and reward prediction error.
Oh, say more about that.
Well, if you expect a massive reward, like being invited to a highly exclusive, secretive gathering of elite billionaires and you don't get the invite, your brain registers that as a massive failure and a threat to your social status. Or if you buy a 200-foot yacht, but then you anchor next to a rival billionaire who just bought a 250-foot yacht, your expectations for dominance have suddenly exceeded your reality.
The gap is negative again.
Yes. You experience acute, agonizing unhappiness despite sitting on a floating palace.
Meanwhile, let's run the math on the grandmother. Her objective circumstances might be a 3 out of 10 financially. She can't afford a nice restaurant. She can't travel. She has to carefully budget her groceries. But her expectations for what the world owes her are a 1 out of 10.
Right. She just wants her tomatoes to grow.
Exactly. She just hopes her tomatoes sprout and the library has the next mystery novel she wants. So, circumstances, which is 3, minus expectations, which is 1, she's operating at a surplus of +2. Every single day, she actually feels richer on a biological experiential level than the billionaire with the negative gap.
If we extrapolate on why this psychological gap behaves this way, we have to look deeply into the behavioral economics of adaptation, specifically what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill or hedonic adaptation.
It's the brutal treadmill.
It is. Human beings possess an incredibly powerful psychological immune system. We are designed to rapidly adapt to new circumstances, both good and bad, so that we can return to a baseline state and remain alert to new changes in our environment. When you have unlimited financial resources, your baseline, for what feels normal, shifts radically and aggressively upward.
So the extraordinary becomes ordinary.
Exactly. For an average person, eating a perfectly seared Wagyu steak at a 5-star restaurant is a rare, memorable event that provides a massive spike in joy. But for a billionaire, a 5-star meal isn't a treat, it is literally just a Tuesday. It is the baseline expectation of caloric intake.
Right. There is absolutely no anticipation. And that anticipation, that specific tension-filled gap between the struggle to obtain something and the ultimate reward of getting it, is a huge part of the neurological machinery that makes people feel alive and happy.
It's the thrill of the chase.
Yeah. If you can have anything you want the precise second you want it, you destroy the pleasure of anticipation. The person who has everything but whose brain has adapted to want even more is constantly looking up at an invisible, unattainable standard. They feel profoundly poor, constantly deprived.
Whereas a person who has very little, but who has actively trained their mind to want absolutely nothing else, feels incredibly rich. They have achieved that elusive state where nothing is missing, so their brain can finally relax.
And before we move on, it is vital to remember a massive caveat that the author carefully clarifies here. We need to make sure the listeners don't misinterpret the lesson.
This is a crucial point.
This analysis of the grandmother versus the billionaire is not a puritanical demand that you go sell all your worldly possessions, move to the woods, and live like an ascetic monk to find peace.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I want to emphasize this with a megaphone for everyone listening. The text is very clear, and behavioral economics backs this up. You do not have to take a vow of poverty to be happy.
You are allowed to have nice things.
You're allowed to have a huge, beautiful house. You're allowed to drive an incredibly fast, expensive car. You're allowed to fly first class and take luxurious vacations to exotic places. There is nothing inherently evil or psychologically damaging about nice things.
The secret, the entire trick to mastering the art of spending money, is being capable of enjoying all of it while fiercely maintaining the ability to desire nothing more than what you currently have.
Exactly. It is the unmanaged desire that causes the suffering, not the physical possessions themselves. The pain comes from the gap, not the goods. And this brings us to what I consider the most profound shift in the entire chapter, a radical reimagining of how we think about the very act of wanting things.
This part blew my mind.
In our hyper-consumerist society, we usually think of desire as a harmless or even positive motivator. We say things like, I want a new car, or I want to hit $1 million in revenue, and we view that desire as a healthy goal, a North Star guiding our ambition.
But the author frames desire entirely differently. He argues, quite shockingly, that desire is actually a hidden form of debt.
A hidden form of debt.
Okay, let's really unpack this, because when I read this concept, it completely rewired how I process my own goals and aspirations. Let's look at the mechanics of this. When you are sitting on your couch, perfectly fine, and you suddenly say to yourself, I would be so much happier if I had that new luxury SUV, what are you actually doing to your brain in that specific moment?
What you are doing is weaponizing your own attention against your current well-being. By declaring that you need the SUV to be happy, you are exclusively, intensely focusing on the fact that you are not happy right now.
You're highlighting what's missing.
You are literally broadcasting a signal to your nervous system saying, my current reality is insufficient, broken, and lacking.
Right. You are actively creating a gap where one didn't even exist 60 seconds ago. Before you saw the commercial for the SUV or before you saw your neighbor drive by in it, you were totally fine. Your circumstances hadn't changed. But the moment you decided you wanted it, you artificially manufactured a psychological deficit. You put yourself in the red.
That artificially manufactured deficit is the debt. Desire is a hidden form of debt that must be paid back with your own peace of mind before you get to feel any happiness.
That is such a powerful way to frame it.
Think about how traditional financial debt works. You borrow $100,000 today to buy something you can't afford. What does that mean? It means you have legally obligated your future self to labor, to sweat, and to stress in order to pay that money back, plus interest.
You are mortgaging your future freedom for a present acquisition.
Psychological debt works the exact same way, just with different currency. By setting a new, unfulfilled desire, you are mortgaging your current, present moment contentment. You are drafting a contract with yourself that says, I am not allowed to feel whole, satisfied, or happy until I somehow acquire this item or achieve this arbitrary status.
It's exactly like you are taking out a high-interest loan against your own peace of mind. And the interest rate on that psychological loan is paid out daily in the form of anxiety, envy, and a low-grade, persistent dissatisfaction.
Yes.
Every single day you wake up and you don't have the new car, you haven't hit the revenue goal, you are paying that emotional interest. You feel like you are falling behind. You feel inadequate.
And just like financial debt, psychological debt can easily, and often inevitably, spiral completely out of control into a form of bankruptcy. Because what happens when you finally hustle, grind, and save enough to actually buy the car? Does the debt clear forever?
Of course not. You feel an unbelievable rush of happiness for about, what, maybe 3 days? 2 weeks, tops? And then hedonic adaptation kicks in. The new car smell fades. It just becomes your car.
The baseline resets.
It gets a tiny scratch on the door from a shopping cart. The check engine light comes on. It needs a $200 oil change. And suddenly, you are sitting in traffic looking at an even newer, slightly more expensive model in the lane next to you.
Precisely. You pay off the initial psychological debt, but instead of enjoying being debt-free, you immediately walk back into the emotional bank and take out a new, much larger loan. You tell yourself, okay, the luxury SUV didn't provide the lasting existential happiness I thought it would, but surely the bigger house in the gated community will.
You are constantly in arrears to your own ever-escalating expectations.
To highlight just how absurd and tragic this trap is, the author introduces a truly stunning quote from the renowned Irish novelist and philosopher Iris Murdoch. She observed human behavior and said, "People from a planet without flowers would think we must be mad with joy the whole time to have such things about us."
Mad with joy. I love that imagery so much. It forces a complete perspective shift. If an extraterrestrial alien came down to Earth, someone from a barren, gray, rocky planet, and they saw these fragile, brightly colored, incredibly smelling, mathematically intricate things just voluntarily growing out of the dirt everywhere, lining our streets and our backyards, pushing through cracks in the sidewalk, they would think we were living in an absolute, unimaginable paradise.
They'd be blown away.
They would assume that human beings must just walk around weeping with gratitude all day long because we are surrounded by this sensory miracle.
But are we mad with joy?
Yeah.
Are we weeping with gratitude? Of course not. The vast majority of people walk right past a bed of blooming roses while staring at their phones, completely oblivious, feeling stressed about an email.
It's so true.
Why? Because of evolutionary psychology and our inherent negativity bias. Our brains are wired to ignore abundance and safety and to hyperfixate on scarcity and threats. The flowers have become our baseline reality. They're categorized as safe and normal, so the brain filters them out to save processing power.
And taking that kind of profound abundance completely for granted creates an unquenchable neurotic thirst for more extreme stimuli. It blinds us to the everyday miracles of our current reality, like hot showers, safe food, and modern medicine, and keeps our attention intensely focused solely on the few things that are still missing from our lives.
It perfectly reminds me of the brilliant Don Draper quote from the show Mad Men that the author paraphrases in the book. Draper, an advertising executive whose literal job is to manufacture desire in the public, says, "Happiness is just that feeling you get right before you need more happiness."
That quote is the ultimate distillation of this entire phenomenon. It perfectly captures the addiction cycle of consumerism and ambition. You desperately chase the fleeting dopamine hit of a new purchase, a new title, a new milestone.
But because dopamine is biologically designed to be fleeting, it evaporates almost instantly, leaving you with a neurochemical hangover, desperate and twitchy for the next hit.
It is the hedonic treadmill operating at maximum speed. You have to keep running faster, working harder, taking on more stress, and spending more money just to stay in the exact same place emotionally. You are expending massive amounts of energy just to maintain a baseline level of okay.
To bring in another analogy here, it's exactly like drinking salt water when you are stranded in a life raft, dying of thirst. You are surrounded by an ocean of water, your throat is parched, the urge to drink is overwhelming, so you cup your hands and you drink the seawater.
For one tiny glorious second, the physical wetness in your mouth feels like total relief. It tricks your brain into thinking you've solved the problem.
But almost immediately, the biological reality sets in.
Yes, and to take that saltwater analogy even further, to really illustrate the mechanism when you drink the ocean water, the salinity is so high that your kidneys actually require more fresh water to process and flush out the excess salt than you originally consumed in the sip.
It is a biological net negative.
Your body literally has to pull water from its own cells to process the salt, accelerating your dehydration and pushing you closer to death. Psychologically, giving in to the endless cycle of material desire works the exact same way. Buying the massive luxury house or the yacht requires more mental water, more cognitive load, more stress to maintain it, more anxiety to insure it, more fear of losing it.
It leaves your baseline capacity for happiness even more dehydrated than before you made the purchase.
That is terrifying, but it makes so much sense. Chasing fleeting happiness through unexamined material desire feels like relief in the moment of transaction, but it actively destroys our capacity for true, lasting contentment over time. It is a psychological net negative.
Which is why, if we connect this to the broader thesis of the chapter, the author is revealing a very practical, highly actionable, albeit challenging takeaway for the listener. If you want to be happy, you have to consciously intervene and stop chasing the dopamine spikes. You have to break the addiction.
You have to step off the treadmill.
The only way to actually live fully in the present moment, which physics and philosophy agree, is the only place human life actually happens, is to stop aggressively demanding a better future.
Stop demanding a better future. I have to admit, that sounds incredibly counterintuitive. If you are a high achiever, an entrepreneur, or someone driven to succeed, telling yourself to stop demanding a better future sounds dangerously close to giving up. It sounds like a recipe for stagnation.
It does sound radical, but we have to think about the mechanics of attention and enjoyment. You can only extract joy from what you have right now if a significant portion of your mental bandwidth isn't being hijacked by dwelling on past regrets or obsessing over future acquisitions.
You can't be in two places at once.
Exactly. As the author notes, it is only when you achieve a complete, temporary absence of expectations, the absence of the nagging thought that things would have, could have, or should have been better than they currently are, that you get to actually genuinely enjoy what you have, what you are doing, what you have built, and the people you are sharing it with. You have to turn off the expectation engine to let the enjoyment engine run.
When you are depthly content, you are no longer chasing. And if you aren't sprinting on the treadmill, you can actually step off, sit still, and look around at the life you've already built. Which leads us perfectly, logically, into the final major paradigm shift the author presents in this chapter.
The new metric for wealth.
Right. If the old way of chasing happiness is broken, we fundamentally need to redefine how we measure wealth in the first place. We need a new metric.
We do. Because the obvious, culturally accepted, additive way to think of wealth is simply an accumulation model. We are taught that more money directly equals more wealth, more assets under management, a higher net worth calculation, a bigger real estate portfolio, more commas in the bank account.
It's a linear brute force model.
But the source material offers a much more sophisticated, nuanced calculation that accounts for human psychology.
And I'll be honest, when I read this formula, it was the biggest aha moment of the entire deep dive for me. It completely reframed my entire financial life. The author states, the best measure of wealth is what you have minus what you want.
What you have minus what you want. Let's really look at the mathematical and psychological mechanics of this formula, because it is incredibly empowering for the average person. In the traditional accumulation model of wealth, you only have one lever you can pull: making more money.
You have to increase the what you have side of the equation.
Which requires you to work harder, work longer hours, ruthlessly negotiate raises, invest more aggressively, and take on significantly more risk in the market.
Which, let's be honest, is largely out of your direct control. You can't control the macroeconomic environment. You can't control if the stock market crashes. You can't always control if corporate politics prevent you from getting the promotion, or if a global pandemic shuts down your small business. Relying solely on the have lever is highly stressful because it's vulnerable to external chaos.
Exactly. You are tying your happiness to variables you do not control. But in this new formula, wealth equals what you have, minus.
Yeah.
What you want, you are suddenly handed a second lever. And this second lever, the what you want lever, is entirely 100% within your own psychological control. No one can force you to want something.
The what you want lever, that is the secret weapon.
Yes. And the beautiful truth of the mathematics here is that systematically desiring less has the exact same mathematical and biological impact on your well-being and your ultimate sense of wealth as gaining more money.
Let's run some numbers on that.
Okay, let's look at the numbers. If you want to increase your perceived wealth by $50,000 this year to feel more secure, you have two choices. You can try to grind out an extra $50,000 in gross income, but remember that extra income is heavily taxed, it is subject to inflation, and acquiring it might cost you your weekends, your health, or time with your family.
Or you can take the second path.
You can systematically audit and lower your lifestyle desires by $50,000, You can decide you don't need to upgrade the kitchen, you don't need the luxury car lease, and you don't need the country club membership. The net result on your psychological wealth, your feeling of having breathing room, is mathematically identical. But the second path is untaxed, guaranteed, and immediate.
And the second path is a game you can actually win. That is a profound realization. The first path, chasing more, is a rigged game because of hedonic adaptation. As we discussed, your expectations will naturally and invisibly inflate to consume the new income.
You get the $50,000 raise, and suddenly you feel like you need a nicer vacation to recover from the stress of earning the $50,000.
Exactly. But deliberately, consciously managing and capping your desires leads to durable, unshakable contentment. There's an ancient Stoic saying quoted in the text that sums up this entire philosophy perfectly. It says, "Not needing wealth is more valuable than wealth itself."
It is a profound truth, because not needing wealth means you have already achieved the ultimate end goal of wealth, which is peace of mind, freedom from anxiety, autonomy over your time, and a deep sense of having enough without actually having to take on the massive risk, the ulcer-inducing stress, and the moral compromises often required to acquire a massive fortune.
You have essentially bypassed the middleman. You went straight to the psychological state that the billionaire is desperately trying to buy, but you did it for free.
I want to jump in here again just to reassure the listener,
Yeah.
because I know the knee-jerk fear that comes with embracing this concept of the want lever.
Oh, for sure.
Desiring less does not mean you have to become an extreme aesthetic minimalist. It doesn't mean you have to sleep on a floor mattress, own only one spoon, and stare at a blank wall for entertainment. It doesn't mean you don't know how to have a good time, or that you aren't allowed to enjoy the literal fruits of your hard-earned labor.
Not at all. That is a total misunderstanding of the concept. In fact, I would argue that practicing true contentment is the deepest, most authentic way to actually enjoy the beautiful house you purchase, the nice clothes you wear, and the vacations you take. Think about it practically.
Right.
If you save up and go to a stunning 5-star beach resort, but you spend the entire week obsessing over the fact that you couldn't afford the larger presidential suite, or you spend your afternoons looking out at the super yachts anchored offshore and feeling a burning sense of jealousy, you aren't actually experiencing the amazing vacation you paid for.
You're completely missing it.
Your physical body is sitting on a beautiful beach, but your mind is trapped in a state of debt and lack. You are squandering the experience. But if you practice this philosophy of contentment, if you aggressively push that what I want variable down to absolute zero in that specific moment, you extract 100% of the joy, the relaxation, and the beauty from the experience you are currently having. You actually get a vastly better return on your financial investment.
That is the ultimate ROI. You maximize the utility of every dollar spent because your mind is fully present to receive the benefit. It brings us back to the stark, unavoidable reality that human happiness is incredibly complex and fleeting, but human misery is highly predictable and easily manufactured.
Oh, so easily manufactured.
If you want to guarantee that you will be miserable for the rest of your life, regardless of how much money you make, the formula is simple. Just anchor your lifestyle expectations in your peer group to the most wildly successful, wealthy people you can find on social media.
Create a mental framework where even exceptional top 1% success in your own life feels inadequate because some tech founder you follow on Twitter just bought a private island.
It is basically a binding psychological contract you sign with yourself, guaranteeing perpetual unhappiness.
Which is exactly, predictably, what we see happening with those miserable billionaires from the beginning of the chapter. They sign the contract. Their peer group is no longer regular people. Their comparison group consists entirely of other multi-billionaires.
So the gap between what they have and what they desperately want never actually closes. They are trapped on a gilded treadmill.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the entire thesis of this chapter, and really the entire philosophy of Morgan Housel's work on money, is a desperate plea for radical self-awareness.
True financial success isn't just a robust spreadsheet of diversified assets.
Yeah.
It is not just about maximizing compounding interest in a tax-advantaged brokerage account. Those are just tools.
Right.
True wealth is a balanced equation where your internal psychological expectations are managed, audited, and aggressively pruned just as rigorously, if not more so, than your external financial expenses. You have to treat your desires with the same suspicion and strict budgeting as you treat your credit card bill.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you go back to your life, your job, and your bank accounts today? It means that the ultimate cheat code hack for anyone in business, entrepreneurship, or just life in general is realizing that engineering a smaller gap between what you have and what you want is the fastest, most reliable, and most stress-free route to being truly wealthy.
It is the only shortcut in finance that actually works. You don't have to wait 30 years for the stock market to compound your wealth. You can consciously pull the expectation lever today, right now, in your own mind, and feel the psychological benefits of massive wealth immediately.
It is a profound, life-altering shift in perspective if you actually implement it. And to leave you with something to really chew on, to mull over on your own as you go about your day, consider this provocative, penetrating question taken directly from the text.
Would you rather be a billionaire who wakes up every single morning anxious about what you don't have and fiercely jealous of those who have more, or an ordinary person who wakes up so content with so much pleasure, able to deeply appreciate what you have regardless of how much that is?
It really puts that million-dollar question we started the show with into sharp perspective, doesn't it? Getting exactly what you want might not be the blessing you think it is, especially if the machinery of your wants is completely out of control. But what happens when you play the game, you pull the levers, and you finally do get the massive amount of money you always dreamed of, only to discover the messy, miserable, deeply human parts of life that cold, hard cash simply cannot fix? Join us on our next deep dive as we explore the hidden costs of success, the isolating nature of extreme wealth, and the invisible burdens of the ultra-rich that no one ever talks about.
What if the most valuable, highest-yielding asset you could possibly own doesn't sit in a brokerage account, a real estate trust, or, a crypto wallet? What if the ultimate shortcut to being truly wealthy is simply the psychological ability to not need to prove yourself to strangers?
I mean, it forces a complete reevaluation of how we measure success, right?
Yeah, completely.
Because we are so deeply conditioned to view wealth strictly through this lens of accumulation. We look at what we can count, what we can physically display.
Right, stuff you can show off to the neighbor.
Exactly, or the colleague sitting in the next office over. But treating a psychological disposition like a mindset as a tangible financial asset, that challenges the entire foundation of, well, modern consumer economics.
It really does. And so in today's deep dive, we are unpacking a really fascinating segment from Morgan Housel's The Art of Spending Money. Specifically, we're looking at Chapter 4, which is titled, The Most Valuable Financial Asset is Not Needing to Impress Anyone.
It's such a great title.
It is, right. And you, the listener, you are going to learn why managing your desires is a far more effective wealth-building tool than merely growing your income.
Absolutely.
And we're going to explore why taking control of your internal benchmarks is really the ultimate superpower for anyone interested in business or entrepreneurship, or frankly, just living a profoundly good life.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that we are treating psychology as a very real, tangible financial asset.
Right.
The mission today is to show you that the math of wealth is actually quite easy. I mean, you earn, you save, you compound.
The spreadsheets do the work.
Exactly, the math is easy. But the mindset of wealth, that is an art form. If you fail to master the psychological side, all the mathematical compounding in the world won't save you from feeling perpetually, impoverished.
Yeah, like you never have enough. Okay, let's unpack this. Because when you look at a traditional personal balance sheet, the focus is almost always entirely on the assets column.
Right, the top line.
Yeah, we want to acquire more capital, more physical property, a fancier job title. We pour all our life energy into making that top line number go up. But Housel is suggesting something that kind of flips the entire script.
He really does.
He proposes that we should actually focus massive amounts of energy on shrinking a hidden liability, which is the psychological burden of caring about what random people think of us.
And to understand why shrinking that liability is so revolutionary, we have to look at the evolutionary biology that built our brains in the first place.
Right, the hardwiring.
Exactly. Human beings are, at our core, we're hypersocial primates. For hundreds of thousands of years, our physical survival depended entirely on our status within a very small tribe.
Like maybe, what, 150 people?
Yeah, usually capping out right around 150. And if you were well regarded by that tribe, you received a share of the meat after a hunt, you were protected from predators, you were cared for when you got sick.
But if they didn't like you?
If your status fell and you became an outcast, you didn't just feel bad emotionally. You starved or you froze to death.
Wow, so it was literally life or death.
Literally. So the desire to signal our worth to others, to broadcast that we are successful and capable, that's not a character flaw. It is a survival mechanism that's just deeply hardwired into our neurobiology.
Right, which makes total sense when your group is a small band of hunter-gatherers.
Sure.
Your immediate survival is tied to theirs. But today, the tribe is, what, 8 billion people?
Yeah, the scale is totally broken.
We are walking around with this Pleistocene-era software trying to process a modern globalized environment where we interact with, thousands of strangers every single day.
And that mismatch, that's the core of the problem right there. We engage in what behavioral economists call performative spending.
Performative spending. Okay, yeah.
The brain tells us, hey, you need to signal your values so the tribe won't abandon you. So what do? We stretch for the massive mortgage on a house that has like 3 empty bedrooms.
Right, or we lease a car with a terrifying monthly payment.
Exactly. We buy a mechanical watch that costs as much as a year of college tuition. And we do this just to signal status. But Housel offers this beautifully efficient formula to counter it.
Which is?
When you actively suppress the need to impress other people, your baseline desires naturally fall. And when your desires fall, your satisfaction with the resources you already possess automatically grows.
So you experience an immediate surplus of satisfaction.
Exactly. You haven't generated a single extra dollar of income, yet you feel instantly richer.
You literally generate wealth out of thin air just by dropping the performance.
Yep.
It's kind of like discovering you've been carrying a 40-pound backpack on a hike for no reason, and you just choose to take it off.
That's a perfect analogy.
But I want to look at the specific language Housel uses here. He emphasizes the ability to not need to prove yourself to strangers.
Right?
Why strangers specifically? Because, I understand the urge to impress a boss who controls your salary, or maybe a partner you want to build a life with. There's tangible utility there. But spending capital to impress people you don't even know, that seems fundamentally irrational.
No, it's completely irrational, but it happens constantly because the stranger represents this infinite, unwinnable arms race.
Unwinnable how?
Well, if you are trying to impress your close friends or your family, there's a natural ceiling to the performance, right? They know your flaws, they know your history. Their respect for you is ultimately tethered to your character, not your stuff.
Right, my best friend doesn't care what watch I'm wearing.
Exactly. But the stranger is a faceless, bottomless void. If your strategy for feeling valuable is to buy a luxury car to command respect from people at stoplights, you have entered a game that literally cannot be won.
Because there's always another stoplight.
Always. There will always be a new stranger pulling up next to you in a vehicle that costs twice as much as yours.
Yeah, it's like building a physiological tolerance to luxury. Almost like caffeine.
Oh, so?
Well, the first time you drink an espresso, you're wired for hours. But a year later, you need 3 espressos just to cure the withdrawal headache. If you use material goods to buy the admiration of strangers, the high fades the moment you drive off the lot.
That is so true.
You spend real, hard-earned capital, which is money that represents hours of your finite life, to purchase a fleeting second of assumed admiration from someone who doesn't care about you, and someone you will never, ever see again.
And the deeper irony here, which Housel touches upon in his broader work, is the concept of the man-in-the-car paradox.
Oh, I love this concept. Explain that for the listener.
So when you see someone driving a $250,000 Ferrari, you rarely look at the driver and think, wow, that person is incredibly successful and I deeply admire them.
No, I never look at the driver.
Right. Instead, you look at the car and you imagine yourself driving it. You imagine how much people would admire you if you were behind the wheel.
So the person who bought the car is completely invisible.
Exactly. The person who bought the Ferrari thought they were purchasing respect. In reality, they just bought a very expensive mirror for other people's status anxieties. They aren't the star of the show. They are just a prop in a stranger's daydream.
That is wild to think about. You are draining your liquidity to serve as background scenery for someone else's ego.
It's a terrible investment.
Right. And for you listening right now, try running your latest major purchase through this filter. Think about the last time you stretched your budget for, say, a car or a designer handbag or a high-end tech gadget.
Or a luxury vacation.
Yeah, a vacation. Now, strip away the social element. If you were legally forbidden from ever posting a photo of it, if no one outside your immediate household would ever see it, would you have still allocated the capital to acquire it?
That is such a highly revealing diagnostic tool, because if the answer is no, you have to acknowledge that you didn't buy a tool for your own utility or comfort.
You bought a billboard.
You bought a billboard to advertise your perceived status, and maintaining a personal billboard in a crowded marketplace is an incredibly expensive endeavor with terrible returns.
But stepping away from that billboard requires a fundamental shift in how you evaluate your own progress.
Mm.
You can't just, stumble into a non-performative mindset.
No, it takes active work.
You have to actually replace the external scorecard with an internal one. Which brings us to a really fascinating distinction the text makes between the two benchmarks of life.
Yeah, the framework suggests that we are constantly measuring our worth against two distinct benchmarks.
Right.
First, there is the internal benchmark. This is an assessment of how content you are with your own progress, your alignment with your personal values, and just the integrity of your daily life.
How you feel when you're alone in a room.
Exactly. Then second, there is the external benchmark. And this is the aggregate measurement of what society, your peers, and complete strangers think of your accomplishments.
And here's where it gets really interesting. To illustrate the profound danger of getting these two benchmarks confused, Housel points to one of the most intense psychological pressure cookers in modern history, which is the 1968 Sunday Times Golden Globe race.
It is a phenomenal historical case study. Truly, it shows the pathology of the external benchmark perfectly.
Yeah, so set the scene for us. What was this race?
So the year is 1968. The challenge laid down by the Sunday Times was to sail single-handed, meaning completely alone and nonstop, around the entire globe.
Which no one had ever done.
No one in human history had ever accomplished this. The ocean was the ultimate frontier. It was a test of supreme human endurance. You're talking about months of isolation in some of the most violent, unforgiving maritime environments on Earth.
Yeah, the Southern Ocean is a nightmare.
It's brutal. So the race attracts all sorts of sailors, but the contrast between two specific competitors, Donald Crowhurst and Bernard Moitessier, it just perfectly encapsulates this internal versus external struggle.
Okay, let's look at the psychology of Donald Crowhurst first. Because Crowhurst wasn't even a master mariner, right? He was an electronics engineer and like a weekend sailor.
Yeah, he was an amateur, but more importantly, he was an entrepreneur whose business was on the verge of bankruptcy.
Okay, so he's desperate.
Extremely desperate. His entry into the race was motivated almost entirely by the external benchmark. He saw the massive cash prize and all the intense global media attention as the only way to save his failing company.
And his social standing, presumably.
Exactly. He needed the world to view him as a triumphant hero. So he secures heavy corporate sponsorship under immense pressure, essentially mortgaging his entire future on the promise of a glorious victory.
So he sets sail, and reality just violently collides with his expectations.
Violently.
His boat, the Tameth Electron, it was custom built but totally rushed. Almost immediately after leaving England, it just begins to fall apart.
It's leaking, his equipment is failing.
Right, and he is making agonizingly slow progress. So within weeks, the mathematical reality becomes undeniable. Not only is he not going to win this race, but if he pushes into the Southern Ocean with a compromised vessel, he is almost certainly going to die.
The logical, internally driven choice would be to turn around, dock the boat, and accept defeat.
But for a man entirely possessed by the external benchmark, turning back is psychologically impossible.
Accepting defeat meant returning to face his creditors, his sponsors, and a public that he believed would view him as a coward. For him, that humiliation was literally a fate worse than death.
So, cornered by his own need for external validation, Crowhurst makes this catastrophic decision. He decides to fake his journey.
Right.
He breaks radio silence to transmit fraudulent position reports back to the press in England, claiming he is just shattering speed records and conquering the globe.
He essentially constructs an elaborate high-stakes fiction. He is literally sitting in the relatively calm waters of the South Atlantic, just sailing in slow circles, while the entire world is celebrating him as a conquering hero braving the worst oceans on the planet.
That is just terrifying.
The mechanism of his psychological collapse it's harrowing to study. He is completely isolated for months, trapped inside a tiny leaking boat, and equally trapped inside a massive lie.
Because he knows he can't go back, right?
Exactly. He knows that if he returns to England as the supposed winner, his navigation logbooks will be subjected to intense expert scrutiny. The fraud will inevitably be discovered.
So he's trapped.
Completely trapped. The cognitive dissonance between the heroic image he was projecting to the world and the pathetic reality of his situation, it literally began to fracture his mind. The pressure of the external benchmark drove him into deep psychosis.
Already spent weeks just writing these dense manifestos.
Thousands of pages of paranoid, incoherent philosophy trying to justify his actions to the universe. Ultimately, the burden became insurmountable. Crowhurst stepped off the back of his boat into the ocean, taking his own life.
Oh, man.
His vessel was found weeks later, just drifting and abandoned. It's a monument to the fatal cost of living entirely for the applause of strangers.
It's such a tragic, harrowing example of how the external benchmark can literally become a matter of life and death. When your identity is entirely outsourced to the opinions of the public, any threat to that public image triggers a genuine survival panic in the brain.
It's a fight-or-flight response, but against your own reputation.
Exactly. Now, on the exact same ocean, in the exact same race, we have the complete antithesis of Crowhurst, which is Bernard Moitessier.
Moitessier was a completely different breed. He was a deeply experienced mariner who viewed sailing not as a sport or a path to fame, but really as a spiritual discipline.
For him, the ocean was a place of profound internal clarity.
Yes, he entered the race, but he operated entirely on an internal benchmark.
And the incredible thing is, he was actually winning.
He was.
While Crowhurst was faking his coordinates, Moitessier was legitimately conquering the globe. He navigated the treacherous waters of Cape Horn, he endured the storms, and as he rounded the final stretch heading north up the Atlantic, he was on track to set the fastest time and claim the ultimate victory.
The global press was waiting for him in England. Massive crowds, lucrative sponsorships, book deals, eternal fame. It was all ready to be handed to him.
And this is where the story becomes legendary. Because as Moitessier gets closer to Europe, the reality of what awaits him begins to set in.
Right.
He realizes that returning to that media circus, the intrusive questions, the commercialization of his achievement, it would completely destroy the profound internal peace he had cultivated during his months at sea.
The external rewards were actively toxic to his internal baseline.
So he makes a decision that just baffled the entire world. He doesn't just quietly finish the race and decline interviews. He actively abandons a winning race.
He turns his boat away from Europe.
Yeah. He aims for the Pacific, and he uses a slingshot to fire a message wrapped in a tin can onto the deck of a passing commercial freighter.
And the message he sent perfectly encapsulates the triumph of the internal benchmark.
What did it say again?
He wrote, "I am continuing nonstop to the Pacific Islands because I am happy at sea and perhaps to save my soul."
Wow.
He willingly forfeited the money, the fame, and the history books. He sailed halfway around the world a second time, dropping anchor in Tahiti, completely unbothered by what the Sunday Times or the global public thought of him. He protected his internal wealth at the cost of external glory.
Now, I want to push back on this a little bit because I know exactly what someone listening is thinking right now.
Okay, let's hear.
It's a beautiful romantic story, but let's be real. Most of our listeners have mortgages, they have young children, they have employees who rely on them to make payroll. They operate in a society where external metrics actually matter.
Of course they do.
Right. If you are a startup founder trying to raise Series A funding, you can't just tell a venture capitalist, hey, I'm not going to show you my revenue metrics because I'm operating on an internal benchmark and I'm sailing to Tahiti.
Right. They'd laugh you out of the room.
Exactly. So how does someone apply this concept when their very real external obligations demand that they perform for society?
Well, that is the vital friction point of this concept. Look, Housel is not advocating for total societal abandonment. Moitessier's exact actions, spending 10 months alone at sea and rejecting all social integration, that would be disastrous for a normal person.
Yeah, my family would not appreciate that.
No, they wouldn't. We require community, and modern community requires engaging with external systems. However, extreme examples are neurologically useful because they magnify the subtle, everyday trade-offs we fail to notice. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Crowhurst versus Moitié dynamic plays out every single day in modern business.
Oh, you see the Crowhurst constantly in the tech and startup worlds.
Precisely. The modern Crowhurst is the founder who takes on massive, highly restrictive venture debt to fuel unnatural hypergrowth, simply because they want the prestige of a massive valuation announcement in the financial press.
They want that Forbes cover.
They do. They fake their metaphorical coordinates by manipulating user metrics or hiding structural flaws in the product.
Like the Theranos scandal.
Exactly like Theranos, or various crypto collapses. They are terrified of the external humiliation of a down round or a modest return. The stress of maintaining the illusion of infinite scale destroys their nervous systems, it alienates their families, and ultimately implodes their companies. They are sailing in circles, faking the logs.
And the modern Moitessier is the entrepreneur who chooses a completely different game.
The modern Motesia is the person who builds a highly profitable, sustainable, remarkably boring business.
Like a B2B logistics software company.
Yes, or a specialized manufacturing firm. They aren't seeking the cover of Forbes. They don't attend networking events just to signal their status. They operate on an internal benchmark. Does this business generate enough cash flow to support my desired lifestyle?
Does it allow me to sleep 8 hours a night?
Does it allow me to be present for my children's lives? If the answer is yes, they consider themselves wildly successful, completely independent of whether Silicon Valley considers them disruptive or not.
They realize the external benchmark is a moving target that society controls, while the internal benchmark is a fixed target that they control.
Exactly.
If you can master that internal benchmark, if you can actually stop caring about the crowds waiting at the dock, it changes the entire neurochemical experience of your daily life. It opens up the capacity to experience joy from what you already possess.
Which is huge.
Yeah, which brings us to a crucial psychological mechanism detailed in the text.
Yeah.
The hedonic treadmill and the absolute necessity of contrast.
The hedonic treadmill is not just a philosophical concept. It is a biological reality rooted in how our brains process dopamine.
Explain that. How does dopamine factor in?
The human nervous system is designed to detect changes in the environment, not constant states. When you experience a positive change, a promotion, a new house, a luxury purchase, your brain releases a spike of dopamine. You feel a surge of joy.
But it doesn't last.
No, because dopamine is fundamentally about the pursuit of reward, not the long-term enjoyment of it. Very quickly, your dopamine receptors downregulate. The new luxury becomes the new baseline.
The environment is no longer changing, so the brain stops rewarding you.
Exactly. You adapt. Yesterday's profound luxury becomes today's bare minimum necessity.
It's the reason the thrill of the new car completely evaporates after 6 weeks. But the oppressive reality, the monthly payment, lingers for 5 years.
Right. You are paying a premium for a high you can no longer physiologically feel.
Which is a terrible deal. But Housel offers a very specific tactical antidote to this biological trap. He argues that the key to sustainable joy is contrast, contrast, contrast. He posits that contentment requires a gap.
A gap, yes.
The literal, measurable distance between struggle and reward is where human happiness is synthesized.
To ground this in a highly relatable scenario, Housel draws a stark comparison. Imagine an individual of immense, almost incomprehensible wealth.
Okay.
This person employs a private world-class chef who prepares 5-star Michelin-quality meals for them 3 times a day, 7 days a week, year after year. From a purely objective culinary standpoint, this individual is consuming the absolute pinnacle of human gastronomy.
It sounds like an absolute dream scenario. Every meal is a masterpiece.
It does sound like a dream, but let's look at the neurobiology of the situation. Now, contrast that incredibly wealthy individual with a child from a working-class family where money is tight and dining out is a rare luxury.
Right.
One random evening, the parents surprise the child with an unexpected trip to McDonald's.
The gap between the baseline and the event is massive for that kid.
Exactly the point. The question Housel asks us to consider is, does the billionaire get more actual neurochemical joy from eating his third 5-star meal of that particular Tuesday than the child gets from the first bite of that surprise fast food burger?
The text argues absolutely not.
The psychological data is unambiguous. The wealthy individual experiences almost zero joy. Why? Because there is no anticipation, no friction, and crucially, no contrast.
His baseline reality is perpetually pegged at maximum luxury.
Right, and when luxury is ubiquitous, it ceases to be luxurious. It just becomes the background noise of his existence. He is physiologically numb to it. The child, however, experiences a massive spike in joy because the gap between their everyday reality and the surprise treat is enormous.
Going from nothing to something is mathematically and psychologically infinitely more powerful than going from a lot to even more.
That is the core truth.
Housel makes a brilliant point that the wealthiest you will ever feel in your entire life is likely the moment your bank account goes from $5 to $500.
Oh, without a doubt.
It is a monumental, life-altering shift. The crushing weight of immediate scarcity is lifted. You can breathe. You can buy groceries without doing panic math in your head.
Contrast that with someone whose net worth jumps from $10 million to $20 million.
Right. The mathematical increase is vastly larger, but the psychological contrast is virtually zero. You still sleep in the same custom bed, you still eat the same organic food, you still fly on the same private jets.
The external number changed, but the internal gap remains static.
This raises an important question, though. If our brains are relentlessly wired to normalize everything we achieve, how do we prevent our own ambition from rendering us numb?
It's a great question.
How do we keep the capacity for joy alive without being forced to constantly consume more, bigger, and better things?
The tactical solution is intentionally managing the gap. It requires the discipline to understand that occasional treats generate significantly more enduring joy than perpetual unbroken luxury.
Yeah, it also brings in a surprisingly insightful quote from Arnold Schwarzenegger to illustrate this.
The diet quote.
Yeah, Schwarzenegger talking about the psychology of diet and physical training notes. You should mostly eat food you know is healthy. You should also occasionally let yourself eat delicious food you know isn't healthy. Otherwise, what's the point?
It serves as a perfect analogy for financial and lifestyle management.
It really does, because the core insight isn't just a justification for having a cheat day. The profound insight is that the discipline of doing the strict, routine thing most of the time is the exact mechanism that allows the indulgence to feel so incredible.
The discipline manufactures the contrast.
Exactly. If Arnold ate chocolate cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, it would cease to be a treat. It would become a sickening baseline.
And translating that biological reality into personal finance requires a very counterintuitive approach to wealth accumulation.
Which is what?
It means you must actively resist the urge to erase contrast from your life. When your income increases, or your company goes public, or you get that massive promotion, the societal expectation is that you will immediately upgrade every single vector of your life to match your new income bracket.
The classic lifestyle creep.
Yeah.
You get the raise, so you upgrade the house, you upgrade the cars, you start flying first class, you replace your wardrobe, and you only eat at high-end restaurants. You inflate your lifestyle across the board.
And by doing so, you systematically destroy your capacity for joy. You reset your baseline to a much higher level, meaning you now require exponentially more money just to feel normal.
So what's the practical takeaway for the listener here?
To maintain contrast, you must intentionally inject friction into your lifestyle. Don't upgrade every single aspect of your life just because your income increased. Keep some elements intentionally humble.
Drive the reliable car longer than you need to.
Exactly. Drink the regular coffee. You do this deliberately so that when you do deploy your capital for a splurge, when you book that incredible anniversary trip or buy that beautiful piece of art, it actually registers in your nervous system as an extraordinary event.
It spikes your joy, rather than just becoming the new, hyper-expensive normal.
Treating lifestyle friction not as an enemy to be defeated, but as an essential ingredient for happiness.
Right. If contrast is the vehicle that delivers joy, then our expectations are the terrain that vehicle drives on. Which leads us into the final major concept of the chapter, the architecture of expectations.
Managing expectations is perhaps the most difficult psychological hurdle for high achievers. Because our baseline expectations dictate our ultimate happiness, House argues a profound point. We must exert as much energy and strategic thought into keeping our expectations low as we do into improving our physical and financial circumstances.
But when you tell a driven type A entrepreneur or a young professional to keep your expectations low, their immediate reaction is intense rejection.
They hate hearing that.
Right. They interpret it as an instruction to settle for mediocrity. They think, I'm not going to expect the bare minimum. I want to build something massive.
But Housel isn't talking about settling or lacking vision. He's talking about the baseline entitlement you demand from the universe on a daily basis. He makes the point that when you expect nothing as a given, everything positive that happens becomes a thrilling surprise.
To illustrate the sheer power of baseline expectations, Housel examines one of the most grueling survival narratives in recorded history.
Ernest Shackleton's Imperial Transantarctic Expedition.
It's the story of the Endurance. It is almost impossible to comprehend the level of physical and psychological trauma those men endured.
For context, in 1915, Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, became trapped in the dense pack ice of the Weddell Sea in Antarctica. The ice slowly crushed the wooden ship to splinters, leaving Shackleton and his crew of 27 men completely stranded on a floating, freezing sheet of ice at the bottom of the world.
And there were no radios, no rescue helicopters back then?
They were completely alone. For over a year, they survived on a diet of seal blubber and penguin meat. They endured months of total winter darkness, sub-zero temperatures, constant bone-chilling wetness, and the ever-present terror that the ice beneath their tents would split open and swallow them into the freezing ocean.
It was a daily existence of unimaginable, suffering, and deprivation.
Their reality was reduced to the absolute lowest conceivable baseline. Just surviving until the next morning was a monumental victory.
Eventually, the ice breaks up, and they are forced into 3 tiny lifeboats. After a horrific, freezing journey through violent seas, they manage to make landfall on a place called Elephant Island.
Now, objectively speaking, Elephant Island is a nightmare. It is a desolate, rocky, frozen, inhospitable piece of rock swept by blizzard winds. It offers no shelter and no hope of rescue. It is a terrible place to be.
But when the men finally dragged their boat onto that rocky beach, when they felt solid, unmoving ground under their boots for the first time in over 15 months, one of the crewmen wrote an entry in his diary that defies logic.
What did he write?
He wrote, "One of the finest days we have ever had. A pleasure to be alive."
He called a frozen, barren rock at the end of the earth a paradise.
Precisely because of the math of expectations. As Housel notes, quoting an author who studied the expedition, the men had achieved a profound, limited kind of contentment because they had been tested to the absolute limits of human endurance and found not wanting.
More importantly, their baseline expectations had been reduced to literal zero. They expected to die in the freezing water.
Right.
Therefore, finding a piece of rock that wasn't actively trying to kill them in that exact moment was perceived as a miracle. It generated the highest joy imaginable because the gap between what they expected, which was death, and their reality, a frozen rock, was infinitely large.
Housel also references the story of Michael May, which brings the same concept into a much more modern context. Michael May was blinded in a chemical accident at age 3. For over 40 years, his entire reality was darkness. In his late 40s, he underwent a pioneering stem cell procedure that miraculously restored his vision. And when you spend a lifetime with an expectation of total blindness, your baseline for visual input is 0. When his sight was restored, he wasn't looking for breathtaking vistas or architectural marvels to feel joy. He was walking around ecstatic over the most mundane things, a speck of dust floating in a sunbeam, the color of a common street sign, the way a shadow fell across a sidewalk.
Things we just walk right past.
Things that sighted people ignore completely brought him to tears of joy because his expectation was 0. Everything was an unbelievable bonus.
These extremes reveal the fundamental, inescapable equation of human psychology. Happiness equals reality minus expectations.
I want to pause on that because it's the core operating system of this entire philosophy. Happiness equals reality minus expectations.
It is an incredibly clean equation, but it highlights a massive structural flaw in how most driven people live their lives. Entrepreneurs, high-level professionals, driven learners, the exact people listening to this deep dive right now. You are almost certainly dedicating 99% of your daily energy, your intellect, and your capital toward increasing your reality.
Working grueling hours.
Working grueling hours to build a better product, secure a higher salary, buy a nicer home, or achieve peak physical health. But you are likely spending 0% of your time managing the other side of the equation, your expectations.
Which creates a vicious cycle because as your reality improves, as you make more money or gain more status, your expectations automatically float up right alongside it. If your reality goes up by 10 points, but your expectations also go up by 10 points, the resulting happiness remains exactly the same. They cancel each other out.
It is the most inefficient way to build a life. You are working 10 times harder, taking on vastly more stress and responsibility just to maintain the exact same baseline level of satisfaction you had 5 years ago when you were broke but hungry.
Let me play devil's advocate here, because if I'm a founder listening to this, I'm thinking, wait, so what does this all mean? Does it mean we shouldn't have ambition? Should we just expect the worst?
No.
If I'm perfectly content with a frozen rock, why would I ever push myself to build a massive company or innovate a new technology? Doesn't managing expectations downward kill the very ambition that drives progress?
That is a very common but flawed interpretation.
Yeah.
It is crucial to distinguish between baseline entitlement and operational ambition. Lowering your expectations is not about adopting a pessimistic, defeatist worldview where you refuse to strive for greatness.
Okay, so what is it?
It is about removing the entitlement to an easy, constantly luxurious reality. You can be fiercely ambitious about building a revolutionary tech company while simultaneously expecting that the process will be agonizingly difficult, that markets will crash, that employees will quit, and that success is not guaranteed.
Expect the friction.
Yes. If your baseline expectation is that building a company is a brutal struggle, then when you encounter a massive problem, you aren't devastated. You expected it. And when you achieve a small win, you are thrilled. You're separating your ambition to achieve from your entitlement to comfort.
It's the difference between hoping for the best and demanding the best. You can pursue greatness without demanding that the universe owes you a smooth ride.
Exactly.
And the practical application here for the listener is to treat expectation management as a daily practice, just like checking your bank balance. When your reality improves, when you get that bonus or hit that milestone, actively force yourself to pause. Celebrate the small upgrades rather than immediately looking for the next one.
Force your brain to experience the gap before you allow your expectations to recalibrate. Because if you don't control the goalpost, your neurobiology will move it for you automatically. That is the true art of spending money and managing wealth. It's realizing that the capital itself is merely a tool. The actual experience of wealth is generated entirely within the cognitive architecture of your mind.
Which perfectly brings us to the synthesis of this entire chapter.
Mm-hmm.
If we step back and look at the whole picture, the evolutionary trap of the personal balance sheet, the tragic external benchmark of Donald Crowhurst versus the internal peace of Bernard Montessier.
The necessity of contrast between the private chef and the McDonald's burger.
Right. And the brutal reality of Shackleton's expectations.
Yeah.
We can really distill the soul of Morgan Housel's argument into one profoundly clear insight.
True wealth cannot be defined by a raw number. It is and always will be a ratio.
It is the ratio of what you have divided by what you want.
The conventional world, driven by advertising algorithms, social media performativity, and just deeply ingrained peer pressure, bombards you with the message that the only path to greater wealth is to endlessly increase the top number.
You must relentlessly increase what you have.
Right. You are instructed to do this by broadcasting your success to strangers, by sprinting faster on the hedonic treadmill, and by playing the unwinnable, anxiety-inducing game of external benchmarks.
But the most potent, highest-yielding financial asset you can cultivate is the realization that you can infinitely increase your wealth simply by reducing the bottom number.
You can take control of what you want.
Yes. And as we've explored from every angle today, the fastest, most effective mechanism to reduce what you want is to sever the psychological need to impress people you don't even know.
Unplugging from the performative spending arms race is the ultimate cheat code to feeling rich. When you stop funding a billboard for strangers, the gap between what you have and what you actually want widens dramatically. And it is entirely within that gap that you find contentment, sustainable joy, and the operational freedom to dictate the terms of your own life.
Much like Montessier choosing the open Pacific over the crowded docks of Europe.
Precisely.
It's an incredibly liberating framework. Stripping away the need for external validation frees up massive amounts of both financial and psychological capital. But it also leaves a complex vacuum.
It does.
Because once you stop using your money to project an image to the outside world, you are forced to confront how your money is affecting your internal world. What happens when you look in the mirror and realize that in the pursuit of financial security, your money has completely hijacked your core personality?
Oh, that is a subtle and incredibly dangerous trap.
It is, and that is exactly what we're going to explore in the next chapter, the dangerous tipping point, where your net worth metastasizes into your identity.
It catches so many high achievers. But before we conclude today's analysis, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought experiment to examine your own baseline.
Leave us with it.
Imagine for a moment that you woke up tomorrow and through some inexplicable event, you were the absolute last person on Earth.
Okay.
But miraculously, all the infrastructure remained. All the luxury boutiques, all the exotic car dealerships, all the penthouses were fully stocked, powered, and completely free for the taking. With absolutely no one left to impress, no one to judge your status, and no one to envy your possessions. How drastically would your spending desires and the very things you value change by tomorrow afternoon?
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.